James Bond. Cannonball!
Been like this all day.
Did you rub my lamp?
Thousands of generations living in now. Here we go.
Why is it not working? Hey guys, sorry for that. There was a little bit of a weird tech issue there at the beginning. I played the intro, and then there was like an overlay that wouldn't go away. Listen, live streaming is a bitch, as I'm sure many of you know. But anyways, guys, thanks for tuning into this. Welcome to another installment of FilmSpeak Live. I am your host, Griffin Schiller, and you clicked on the thumbnail. Obviously, we're going to be talking about Star Wars. We're going to be talking about it because May the 4th is this week, and this week has really been all about celebrating the legacy of Star Wars, not just the films, but the TV series as well, and really just talking about everything we love about the franchise. And so in honor of that, we're going to be doing our first ever ranking of each film in the Star Wars saga. And now we're not only going to be talking about the films, we're going to be talking about the TV shows as well, more specifically the TV shows that tie directly into the film. So we're going to be ranking all 9 movies, the Clone Wars, Rebels, and the Mandalorian. Now, I know some of you are probably wondering, oh, where's Resistance? Where's the Star Wars Holiday Special? Where's all the other things? Listen, it can get a little muddled. So we're really just going to be tackling the ones that matter. And as always, I could do this by myself, but of course it's so much better when you have someone to chat with and springboard ideas off of and just have a conversation with. And so I've got my good friend Brody Saravelli. You may know him from the Words Are Not Enough James Bond podcast. He's a channel regular, but Brody, you're here. You're live.
Hey, what's going on?
Say hello to the people and let them know how you're doing.
Hello, people. How's it going?
I know.
Ready to hate me when I tell you my Star Wars opinions?
Listen, they can't hate you as much as they're going to hate me, and that's just a fact. You know?
Yeah, you can. I'll use you as a human shield, deflect criticism.
Yeah, you're gonna be the voice of reason. I'm going to be the fanatic here.
Really,
I think
hyping me up.
Listen, I think that realistically, there's only one film that is going to be kind of mixed in terms of placement on your list. And full disclosure, I have no idea what his list is. You probably have an idea of what my list is, but I think it's going to surprise you a little bit when we go through here. But guys, listen,
where your TV shows are.
Yeah, that's the big thing. I think we're pretty good on the film placements, but when it comes to TV, we're a little mixed. But guys, before we get started here, put your rankings down below. We're going to start with 16. I believe there's 16 here, right?
I thought it was 14, but I might have miscounted.
Who knows? It's
all 9 movies and then all 3 TV shows, right?
Yeah, something like that. I don't know. I have 16 numbers here that I put that we could just display stuff. But
okay.
basically the way this thing is going to happen, we're not going to spend too much time lingering on each entry just because we could be here forever. I'm already anticipating it's going to go on very long. But listen, we want to make this as interactive as possible, and so that's why we're doing it live. And so as we go through these, be sure to leave your picks for which film or which television show falls at the specific number that is shown up here on the screen. So I think that's enough chit chat. Let's honestly get into this thing. And if you're watching this on the replay, sorry for the long intro, but be sure to leave your ranking of the Star Wars films, including Clone Wars, Rebels, and The Mandalorian, down in the comments section below. But Brody, I'm going to pass it over to you to take this thing away. Let's go for your I believe it's number 16. 14. We're ranking 14 here. What is your number 14?
My number 14, and this one hasn't changed in a while, is Attack of the Clones. I don't know if you want me to explain why that is.
Go into it, man. Yeah, Attack of the Clones Attack of the Clones is a little bit further up on mine, but I think for most people it's going to be in the bottom echelon of this thing.
I mean, I think my problem, and I'll come back to this analogy in a second, but my problem with Attack of the Clones is imagine you're watching like gymnastics, and the trilogy is like the routine. If you mess up the middle move in your gymnastics routine, you basically, it doesn't matter how well you land, you fucked it up. And I think Attack of the Clones for me is like, well, I didn't mind the start, I like the ending, but you fucked up the routine, and that's kind of like my biggest issue with it. And I like some of the ideas in there, and I think TV shows have done a better job at like sort of exploring those ideas. But as a movie, it's almost watchable.
Yeah, it's yeah, I'm a little surprised that Attack of the Clones is last on yours. I understand why. And I think there's an argument to be made that it is the worst. It's a little bit higher on my list, not too much higher, but there are things that I really enjoy about it. And for as muddled and melodramatic and like frustrating of a middle chapter as it is, I think the action's great. I love just sort of the mystery that's sort of it's a film that theoretically should be way better than it is. Cause you're right. Like all the pieces are there for something interesting. And truthfully, this is probably where the prequel trilogy should have started. There should have been this film, one in between, that kind of takes place during the Clone Wars period, and then episode 3. But yeah, no, I again totally get it why it's in last place. I've just always been a little softer on this, and I think because my number 14 is just an abomination, it just made me appreciate Attack of the Clones a little bit more. But but going on from there, what do you have at number 13?
Number 13 is The Rise of Skywalker.
Okay, good. That's my number 14. I figured. Trash.
Yeah, So going back to my analogy for a second, imagining that a trilogy is like a gymnastics routine, I like the first two maneuvers, I guess, in the sequel trilogy, and it doesn't stick the landing. And it's like, okay, but I feel like the whole routine isn't spoiled by fudging the landing, whereas in the prequels, the whole middle section of your routine is garbage. So for me personally, I like the first two parts, so I can forgive a shitty landing, and it is a shitty landing. It's like it landed and then like broke both of its legs.
Yeah, maybe even its arm, maybe even an arm in there, man.
It probably got brain damage. It's just not good.
Yeah.
But it's a bad movie. It's a bad movie that I think only put a little ahead of Attack of the Clones, not because it's the last movie and not like the middle chapter, and also because I can still enjoy like the banter. I can still enjoy like parts of it. Whereas Attack of the Clones, none of the characters are appealing. I find it just ugly to look at. And Rise of Skywalker is kind of ugly as well in its own way. But
it's a different way, yeah.
I think there's it has the benefit of having, Ian McDiarmid's Revenge of the Sith performance in it. Whereas he's fairly, like, the Emperor is fairly boring in Attack of the Clones because he's just Palpatine. I don't
know. I like how duplicitous he is in Attack of the Clones.
In Attack of the Clones, like he's not
there. Really. But again, he's not the focus of that film. So it's like I wouldn't. Granted,
right? Well, that's what I mean. That's what I mean. Like, it benefits from having him in there hamming it up, whereas Attack of the Clones doesn't get to rest on like things like that because it focuses on two lead performances that suck and one that's completely removed from the rest of the story, which is Ewan McGregor. So, I mean, like that's like the music is bad in both of them, which I think is telling.
See, I disagree. I think that Attack of the Clones actually has some great music.
It has some good tracks. I like Across the Stars and stuff like that. But I think,
come on, the Jango Fett stuff, the Coruscant chase,
there's good stuff in there too.
The arena battle
is a lot of recycled music too, which is weird for John Williams.
You think it's recycled in Attack of the Clones?
Yeah, I mean, like there's just like little moments where it's just like, oh, okay, cool. There's like, I don't know. I guess
I don't know about that.
With like Phantom Menace and Revenge of the Sith both have like these big, exciting action, scores.
Yeah,
and then this one has like a nice love theme, and then a cool little couple of cool action tracks, but there's never that big like battle music. It's like, I don't know. I think it just pales in comparison to the other two scores. I
mean, I agree. It is the weakest.
There are good tracks in The Rise of Skywalker too, but I wouldn't say it's one of my favorite Star Wars soundtracks. Like,
see, to me, Rise of Skywalker is John Williams resting on his laurels. Like, there's no, and a lot of this has to do with the fact that he didn't even know he was writing music too. Right?
yeah.
Like, and this is again why Rise of Skywalker is my least favorite out of the entire trilogy. That movie just fails in every way imaginable. There's no pacing. It doesn't fulfill any of the character arcs. In lieu of fulfilling those character arcs, it's all about cheap nostalgia ploys.
Yeah.
It's just haphazard writing and very just like expository and all about like how can we service this Frankenstein of a story instead of the characters that we've gotten to know for 3 films. And it's one thing to try and do something different from the film that came before, but it's another to just completely disregard it.
Yeah.
And listen, I have my own problems with The Last Jedi, which we'll get into a little bit later on, but my biggest problem with the sequel trilogy, and I know you disagree with the first 2, but for me at least, I feel like each entry actively dislikes the last, and nowhere is that more apparent than in The Rise of Skywalker.
I agree
to the point where we were just talking about this the other day or yesterday. We were like, it doesn't care. It so dislikes the previous entry to the point where General Hux, his arc, like is completely shafted, and in a critical piece of information that pertains to that character's arc is revealed in a theme park ride.
That has more to do with I mean that's just Disney.
That's just Disney, and it's just bad.
I think just like I don't want to defend The Rise of Skywalker because it is number 13. I don't like it, but I think for me it's just the way I would differentiate Rise of Skywalker and Attack of the Clones is Attack of the Clones is on paper it's all good, but in execution it's the most tedious, boring, unenjoyable thing to watch. And The Rise of Skywalker on paper is trash, but at least I don't know, it moves so quickly that it's really hard to dwell on how bad it is. Like when I'm watching Attack of the Clones, I'm just sitting there going, "What is going on? Why?" Is
and I guess the difference for me is I enjoy being in that world, even if it's tedious, even if it's melodramatic, even if the dialogue is terrible. I enjoy being in that world enough, and I enjoy. I see what Lucas was going for, and I can appreciate it. And I, at least like thematically and story wise, it feels like the prequel trilogy had a plan, whereas like Rise of Skywalker just kind of uproots the whole damn thing. And then it's, awful. Again, I don't want to linger too much on this because we could be here debating it all day, but I think these 2 films definitely, for many people, are going to be in the bottom of this list. I do want to address the chat real quick because we've got a few people in here. Dennis S says, if I can pull it up, Rise of Skywalker is excluded because I haven't seen it and never will. And you know what, Dennis?
That's the easiest way to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. It's not a good movie, and it's one of the reasons why I think the sequel trilogy is just pure fan fiction. The trailers and movies says that his number 14 is Rise of Skywalker. Totally understand. Going through here, let's see. Dennis then also says, to quote Cosmonaut on Attack of the Clones, man hires man who hires shapeshifter who uses droid who uses bugs to kill Padme.
Yep. That's pretty much
really can't.
That pretty much sums up the experience of watching Attack of the Clones, which, I mean, oh boy.
Yeah. It's not good. And then we got Ryan O'Toole in here saying Rise of Skywalker is the worst out of all the Star Wars films. What's up, guys? Hey, Ryan, how's it going, man? So now you've given your 14, you've given your 13. I believe we're gonna get to 9 before I start mine. We're gonna go like 5 at a time, kind of here. Or sorry, we'll get to 10 and then we'll go back and do mine. So your 13 was Rise of Skywalker. Your 14 was Attack of the Clones. Real quick, Natty99 said his 13 is Solo. A little bit of a similarity there. We'll talk about that later. So what is yes, we will come back to that. So Brody, what is your number 12?
Number 12 is The Phantom Menace. And I mean, it's a bit of a cliche, but I actually don't hate. I think from this point onwards, I don't really have any major grievances. Oh, I shouldn't say major grievances. I don't really dislike any of the ones above this. I just like them to differing degrees. And The Phantom Menace is the lowest of those, because I mean, like, I actually appreciate that movie to a certain extent. It is definitely the most classic feeling of the prequels. I think it has
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
the most shared DNA with the original trilogy, and it just feels based on how the film was shot and made, it just feels more organic. And I really like that. I like the adventure element of it as well.
Sure.
It suffers from being so disconnected from the rest of its trilogy that it doesn't really matter at all.
Yeah.
And
It's
also,
kind of, but at the same time, it's kind of like a nice self-contained
it's like a little prologue,
adventure. Yeah,
No,
it's a nice little prologue. Yeah.
I still enjoy it, and I think there's a lot of cool
Yeah.
action in there. I think it's some of the best, most exciting stuff in the prequels, just because it's more visceral than most of the action in the prequels in terms of it actually being shot on in person, in camera. But no, I mean, like, it's just it's a solid foundation that I think was severely let down by Attack of the Clones. And this is the thing, right? I think you want to talk about like trilogies being completely divorced from each other. Attack of the Clones didn't need to disregard the Phantom Menace as much as it did. Like,
yeah.
Lucas made a conscious choice to skip that far ahead, mostly because people didn't like baby Anakin and all that stuff. But I feel like, you know, in writing that story, he didn't have to make the first chapter completely irrelevant, and he chose to, and that sort of bugs me about it. But that's not really the movie's fault. That's more sort of
No. I mean, that's
that's
Lucas's prerogative.
fault.
Yeah.
And all that. But yeah, so I mean, I just think it's a fun movie. I don't mind Jar Jar. I mean, Jar Jar's annoying, but he's really not in the movie a ton. So
I think the thing with this movie is there's a lot of hyperbole when people talk about it.
It is the face of the prequels, and so it gets all of the hate directed at the prequels as a whole.
Yeah,
I don't think it necessarily deserves, but
no, and like it's a well-made movie. I think for me, this one, like it's got a lot of exciting action in it, and it's great. But I think like there's a part in the middle there where this thing just like it becomes it slows down to like just a dull,
it does,
you know, meandering kind of like what's going on here, and it actually does that twice. It's once on Tatooine before we get to the pod race, and then the second time is when they go to Coruscant, which it's cool to be introduced to Coruscant for the first time, but it's also just like, can we move it along here? Like,
I think it's mainly, and I mean, this is something that's been said, you know, 1,000 times. It's because the main thrust of the plot is a trade dispute, which isn't just inherently interesting at all.
It's weird, yeah.
And I think like if there had been something more urgent to propel the plot, maybe it could have helped tighten up those scenes. But like if it's like, because like, talk about Tatooine for a second. They're on Tatooine, and their goal is, I mean, we got to get off this planet, but I mean, we're trying to hide the princess or the queen anyway. I mean, there's no real urgency to get off here. We'll get to Coruscant eventually and let them know, but right now, you know, we've just got to make sure she's safe. And it's like, if there'd been something like, oh, they're gonna like, you know, do something terrible on Naboo other than what they've already done, that might have helped drive the plot. But it is just completely, like, you know, lacks purpose, and so the movie just sort of meanders because of it. But
no, for sure. And
forgivable.
Again,
you get the Duel of the Fates, so it's all fine, baby. It's all good.
That's the thing, you know. Honestly, what bumps this for me ahead of Attack of the Clones is that third act. And as much as I love the third. Cool. As much as I love the third act in Attack of the Clones, I'll be like the voice in the minority for that one. You cannot beat Duel of the Fates, and you cannot beat John Williams' score. Like the movie has like a lot of merit to it for all its flaws.
And
plus, Liam Neeson,
dude, just cool.
The cross cutting is amazing, and then Liam Neeson, man, like Qui-Gon Jinn. It's a shame we didn't get more of him, because he was by far the most interesting character in that film. Like, I mean, he carried that movie on his shoulders. It's kind of impressive.
It really should have been. He should have been. I mean, maybe not him playing Obi-Wan, but that role in the script should have been Obi-Wan, since he's just sort of there, and then later in the next movie it's like, oh, he's actually very important. And if you're watching them from the beginning to the end, it's like, oh wow, he was sort of like a side character in that first one.
I know. It's like, and I understand like and not to get derail this too much, but I understand the purpose of showing Obi-Wan as like an Anakin-esque character, just to show like his progression and compare it in comparison to Anakin's. But again, it's just
it'd be like if Obi-Wan was the main character of A New Hope, and then suddenly Luke's the main character. And it's like, nah, he's the mentor. That's like weird,
right?
But I mean, It's weird from a structural standpoint, but in terms of performance and in terms of how much I enjoy Qui-Gon, he's great.
Yeah.
So, it's not too big of a complaint, but.
For sure. Before you move on here, Dennis S. says, the fact that Anakin is so young that you can't do anything interesting with him feels like the biggest error of that movie to me. So, and I think, and I definitely kind of agree with that. They are limited by it. So, okay, moving on to number 11, Brody, what do you have there?
I got Solo, a Star Wars story. It is.
Oh, Solo.
Solo's actually not. I actually don't hate Solo. I think Solo gets a lot of hate. I think Solo's fun. I think it's a little disposable, which is probably its biggest flaw, but it's fun. I don't really have too many criticisms with it. I just prefer other Star Wars media over it, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, it's kind of just like I don't have any strong opinions about it, which is like probably a bad.
It's probably the worst thing that you could say.
I love the soundtrack. The soundtrack's really cool. And
John Williams and John Powell like elevate that movie to a level that it should be at. I mean, listen. When it comes,
I like stuff like I love going and seeing the different locales. I think that was something that has definitely been a little lacking in the Disney era, and I liked getting to see. I mean, we've seen Kessel before, but it was cool to see like them go to Kessel in real life. It was just cool to see like all these different little planets. With like the snow train like on the suspended rail and all this other stuff. I mean I like seeing the underworld too to an extent, but I don't think they covered it as well as they could have. See, I think it was nice just as like a little slice of what this story required. I think it would have been a little overkill if they'd gone into massive world building. It was just sort of like in a lot like the first Star Wars movie, like is just sort of like thrown into this world and just sort of expected to accept it. And I did like that. And I think I like the villain too. I forget his name, but Paul Bettany.
Like something Voss or whatever.
Yeah. And I liked him a lot. I thought, I don't know. I think the movie has a lot of fun elements in it. And I liked all the action. I liked the Kessel Run. I actually didn't mind how that was portrayed. So it just doesn't really, not one I revisit a lot. And also just not one that I have too strong of an opinion about, I guess.
Solo is just pretty unremarkable for me. Tyler Tompkins is in here. Hello, Mr. Tyler, and he is spamming Rise of Skywalker. He is
the third message you sent, or the first, or the fifth?
He is probably the biggest Rise of Skywalker fan that I know. And
wait, really?
Wow. Yeah, he loves that movie.
Oh my God. He should have been here before when I semi defended it, kind of, by making it 13.
You can't. Listen. You can't defend that movie. It's just not good. Okay, so that was your 14 through 11. Now it's time to go back and go through my 14 through 11. Some of them, actually, I think most of them we've already covered, and the one we haven't, I'll just wait for you to discuss. But number 14 for me is The Rise of Skywalker. For many reasons that we've already mentioned, this movie's a pile of dog shit written by people who couldn't care about the sequel trilogy or Star Wars. And the worst crime about that movie is that we did not get John Williams' remix of Duel of the Fates that he apparently wrote for the film, and they decided not to use it.
He wrote like 3 hours of music, so they really had to be selective.
Why? Unbelievable. I hate every decision they make in this, but it's the only time I've walked out of a Star Wars movie and felt nothing. Even
leave me numb. That is a very
it's numbing. It's dumb. The movie has no brain or sense of like what it's doing. It's hopping over all the sad part is there's potential. Like you look at what Colin Trevorrow wrote, or even like some of the drafts afterwards. They had a great idea there that they just decided not to use it. Anyways, I have a rant on why The Rise of Skywalker is the worst Star Wars movie ever made. You can go check that out. It's technically my review of that film. So,
I will say, without like derailing the conversation too much, I don't hate Palpatine coming back. I think that's a lot of it's a lightning rod.
It's just handled poorly.
It is it is handled very poorly, but the concept I don't hate. I think a lot of people really don't like it for some reason. Well, I mean, not even for some reason. I understand why people don't like it. I just
Yeah.
think it had potential and was squandered. But
Yeah, for sure. Moving on to number 13. For me, it's Solo. It's because it doesn't matter. It doesn't pertain to anything. It tells us the backstory of someone who doesn't need a backstory. And I every time I've tried to watch it since the initial viewing, I end up falling asleep or turning it off. It's just very uninteresting. I'll tell you what, though, Braxton Young or Bradford Young, sorry, Bradford Young, the cinematographer, he shot the hell out of this film because it's one of the best looking movies in the Star Wars universe. And again, John Williams' Han Solo theme, incredible, and the way John Powell used it and made it his own is equally as great. I like the concept of exploring the underworld and focusing on like a gunslinger sort of thing. I just think that it was done better in The Mandalorian, and they did it in a way where like we don't have to take in a character that we already know and that we don't need a backstory from. We could just
although,
Oh,
yep. Sorry, you
no.
finished.
Well, what I was gonna say is like we don't need. We can take the approach that they were going for with Solo and apply it to a new set of characters, set in a different time period, and whatnot. And I guess for me, it's just like it's not quite to the extent of Rise of Skywalker, but it is just like basically playing on nostalgia. The Solo name scene might single-handedly be the worst thing ever made, and like the worst like scene in a Star Wars movie outside of Palpatine Returns. I mean, that's the only other one that I can think of that like kind of stacks up to that.
What about you have his power?
Oh yeah, I mean, like, well, I guess you could fill an entire video with the horrible lines in Rise of Skywalker. But I'm serious. The Solo name scene is god awful, and I just, for as much as I love Alden Ehrenreich, I never really bought in. The more I rewatch it, the less Han Solo I see of him.
Oh, really? I actually was surprised by how much, because the odds for me accepting him were stacked against him, and I walked out going, oh yeah, that was Han Solo. Like he sold me, not in look, but in terms of like just demeanor and attitude. I was in terms of like the necessity of a Solo backstory. Yeah, it's not really necessary, but I mean, so is a lot of this like sort of expanded universe stuff that we end up getting. I think for me, one thing I really like about Solo that Rise of Skywalker really tries to undo, but luckily doesn't quite undo, is I liked how it sort of implicitly built up the bond between Han Solo and Rey. I think after seeing Solo, I actually appreciated the Force Awakens a lot more than I had initially, and it was because it's like, okay, seeing where Han Solo came from, seeing him sort of being this guy trying to escape his life, not having a people, that kind of thing. But then you see how quickly he bonds with Rey in that movie, it's like, oh, I kind of actually, there's more depth to that now. And I think if I want anything from these movies, it's that I want them to deepen my appreciation for everything else in Star Wars. And so, do movies about characters that we already know and love, do something like that. Well, I mean, like I can sort of forgive it for that. I do genuinely like that, but
listen, when I think back on it, I'm like, okay, like it could have been worse for sure, but this movie just should have been Lando's movie. It should have just been a movie on Lando, because that's a character that, like, I mean, he's a side character that we know and love, but definitely we could explore more of him. And I think out of all the casting in this film,
could have shown him having his daughter.
Yeah, exactly. Oh God, that's another thing. But Donald Glover, I mean, is incredible as Lando Calrissian. He just slides right into the role. I will say though, I hated L9. I hated L9 and I that weird sort of relationship thing, and like the fact that she was, I know, and I love Phoebe, but like not a great character. Anyways, Solo just doesn't quite do it for me, and the reason I put two of the prequels ahead of this one is because while there's like bad stuff to them, they contribute to the larger story in a way that is meaningful. Whereas like this is just like, it's throwaway. Like I'll never watch it again. So, Marvel Guy says, going to the chat here, he says, Solo isn't bad, but is very inconsequential, and I am very unlikely to choose it when watching a Star Wars movie.
That's pretty much exactly how I feel. Yeah.
That's exactly how I feel as well. I also just feel like the pacing's weird. Like they kill, and like the structure is bizarre. They kill off this crew, and like I never really feel like Woody Harrelson is upset about it, and then they just like kind of move on to a new crew, and it's, I don't know. I felt like there's a lot that's rushed in that film. For me personally. And then Dennis S says Solo is just kind of cute and innocent, which I like. And that's the thing. There are a fair amount of defenders of this film. Some people who say it's the best of Disney Star Wars.
I know a lot of people who say that. Yeah, it's crazy.
I agree. And I think it's kind of crazy to think that, but it just hasn't, it never really did it for me. I mean, granted, you are about to hear some nuclear takes here. So starting with number 12. Number 12, ladies and gentlemen, is The Last Jedi. I
mean, I don't even know if that's nuclear. That's just half and half.
It is
really 12. You're gonna put The Phantom Menace. Oh, Jesus.
I'd rather rewatch them. And all I'll say about this, I will wait to discuss this for when it's up on your list, because I know you're much higher on it than me. But all I will say in regards to this film is that there are so many decisions that I disagree with in it. I feel like while it's not as bad as The Rise of Skywalker by any means, it does sort of actively dislike the previous film, which I know you disagree with, and I'm sure there are plenty of people out there who feel the same way as you. At least for me, it just sort of, every decision that they made that was sort of building upon a previous decision in the last film feels underwhelming and anticlimactic, and it feels like it's subverting expectations for the sake of subverting expectations. You know,
I don't know. I mean, like. Problems, I mean, I'll get more into this when I talk about it later, but I think for every problem that someone might have personally with the film, I don't think it's fair to the filmmakers to say, oh, you just did that for the sake of doing that. I think every decision that they made in the movie creatively serves a purpose, and I mean, it
serves a purpose. It
does build on what was set up in the previous film. I mean, like, you can, zigging instead of zagging is still building off of that initial, point of reference. So it's not like Rise of Skywalker, where instead of zigging or zagging they just go backwards. I think it does build off of those decisions in unexpected ways, albeit, but I don't know. I kind of don't like when people say like, oh, he was just doing it to be edgy or whatever, like for the sake.
I don't think it was doing it for the sake of being edgy. Like, I genuinely think Rian Johnson likes Star Wars. I just didn't like his interpretation of this. I still want him to do another, like, a Star Wars trilogy. I think this is, out of all the films on this list, I wouldn't even say arguably, I would say it is the best made. It's the best looking, and it just the production design, cinematography, the music. I mean, it's one of John Williams' best scores, period. It's just all about whether or not you buy into the decisions he's making, and ultimately,
that is pretty much what it is.
Yeah. I mean, and ultimately, I've just never been able to do that. But we'll get to that a little bit later on your list. I want to address the chat here quickly. Let's see. Eric Thorpe says, I think The Last Jedi is the best of Disney Star Wars. Brody would agree with you. Natty99 says, I agree with The Last Jedi's placement 100%. Thank you. Dennis S says Last Jedi is number 5 for me. Granted, I don't think any of the ones below it are more than mediocre, and that's totally fair. And to be just full disclosure here, 2 out of the 3 prequels I put above it, but the only reason is because I think from a story standpoint and thematically, they feel more consistent to me than what The Last Jedi was doing. Again, people will probably disagree with that, but at least for me, that's sort of what I buy into.
A big part of that is probably because The Rise of Skywalker completely changes what the whole trilogy is about.
Well, it is, and that's I agree, because that movie affected the placement of The Force Awakens on my list.
Yeah.
And I love that movie.
The difficult thing about ranking these things is that they're all interrelated. There's a lot of, like, I mean, we spent half of our time talking about The Phantom Menace, talking about how it related to movies in its trilogy. Like, it is really just one of those things.
For sure. All right. So I believe that was that number 12 or was that number 11 for me? I can't remember. That was number 12. Okay. Sorry, getting a little off traffic here. Number 11 for me is Attack of the Clones for many of the reasons that you said. And actually, I was going back and forth between whether I wanted to put this or Phantom Menace here, because while I like the time period and like the stuff that they explore in Attack of the Clones and the mystery and Jango Fett and the battle at the end, you're right, it is a little too melodramatic. The dialogue's not great, acting isn't great, the green screen is pretty horrendous, even though I understand they were trying to do cutting edge stuff at the time. It just probably wasn't the right movie to experiment on with that. But listen, I
just think the plots. I like the overall story he was trying to tell with that film.
Yeah,
I don't like the like, I guess, the subplots that he injected into it, because it distracts from the main plot, and it also,
you're right, it does, because
much more convoluted for no reason. So
it's way more complicated and convoluted than it really has any need to be, because my favorite part of this film is Obi-Wan going on his little detective mystery sort of thing, trying to find out who tried to assassinate Padme, and I love that, and I love the avenues that it goes down, finding out about like Sifo Dyas and like what's all, so his story arc is very mystery box oriented. The problem is it's mystery box, but we don't get answers to anything that he was trying to uncover. You have to like basically read about it or find it out in another game, and it doesn't matter when it's all said and done. It's just, oh, Palpatine was behind the whole thing, and that's it. So like that's a little frustrating, because it's like while I'm watching this, I'm so into it, and I the conflict between him and Jango is great. I love Kamino. The clones in Attack of the Clones, it's my favorite version of their armor.
I think it is my favorite armor too. I 100% agree with that.
Yeah.
But I was gonna say, it also feels like a wasted opportunity in that the next film is gonna be all about Anakin falling, right?
Yeah.
And we don't really get to see Anakin do anything good or heroic or be friends with Obi-Wan or anything in this film. So it's kind of
like,
when it kind of hurts the next film in that, like, it has to now play catch up in order to do the thing that it was, in trying to do, which is, tell this tragedy. The tragedy
exactly. And
like, the first movie is so far removed, it doesn't even matter. The second movie, Obi-Wan and Anakin spend no time together, and the romance is god awful. And Anakin's an unlikable person who is off kilter from the very start. So it's like, oh, well, who was surprised that this guy was going to go fucking postal? Like,
no, for sure. And like, it's like Hayden Christensen. I love Hayden Christensen, by the way. As a guy,
I think it's what he was given to work with.
Right. No, that's true. And I don't entirely fault him. I know he got a lot of shit when the films came out, and it's not really fair because it's not his fault. But I feel like he just played the character like too awkward and too, I don't know, just like it's hard for me to believe that Padme would fall in love with this guy.
He spoke all raspy the whole movie too. Padme.
It's just weird. It's not good. But anyway, so Attack of the Clones, that's my number 11. All right, so we're in the top 10 now, guys. We're gonna go through our 10 through 6. Brody, kick us off. What is your number 10?
My number 10, you might be surprised, this is actually kind of low because I really do like this show, but it's Rebels. I think
that's fair. Yeah,
I like Rebels. I think of the TV shows that we've got here, it's probably my least favorite, just by comparison. It's got a lot of really great stuff. I think all the Thrawn stuff's great. I think all of the more mystical stuff that it gets into as the show progresses. I also think of the shows on this list, it has the most filler, and it kind of makes it. I mean, I like getting to know these characters. I really do like the characters in the show, but there's just so much filler for so long that I don't really, when I think of the show, I can't pinpoint like a moment or a thing, because it's like, well, what happened in between that, and like what season? Oh, well, then this happened, and then I don't know. And I mean, of the cast of characters, I think they're much better defined than like a crew like in Rogue One, but I think I just I don't know. They're a little too. It's a little too like sitcom family sometimes, which is fine.
Yeah, yeah, and like and again, I totally get that because I think the first season of Rebels isn't great until the last couple episodes. And I would say Clone Wars did something similar, but I don't know. It still managed to hook me more, just because I guess the time
Yeah.
period was more interesting.
I like the anthology style of Clone Wars better. It made like I think telling
Yeah,
the one
yeah.
continuous story made me feel like I had to watch all this filler, and I didn't want to. Whereas with Clone Wars, it's like, oh, this arc's boring. Oh, it doesn't really matter if I skip it, or like, I mean, like on the first viewing, I'll watch it, but then going back, it's like I feel like watching an arc, and I watch 3 episodes, and it takes me like an hour and a half. Well, not even an hour and a half. It takes me like, 45 minutes. It's easy. It's nice. It allows them to tell these more compact, interesting stories rather than threading everything through this one long continuous story. But it is a really good show. Though. It is a very nice, like, looking show and a very just entertaining show. So
yeah, I for sure. And the thing I loved about it, while it never got as dark as Clone Wars did, I was afraid that it was just going to be purely for children, purely just like fun, digging and it starts out that way, but like it immediately kind of goes down like a really dark path to the point where like seasons 3 and 4 are superb. They're excellent. And the Ahsoka versus Anakin battle, oh my god, it's amazing. The fact that they were able to bring back Darth Maul too in a way that like works, and then like how Obi-Wan kills him. Oh my god, it's
some of the best episodes in the show aren't even about like the core cast.
I agree. I actually, the funny thing about Rebels is the best stuff, I would argue, is like the stuff that links into the Clone Wars is the stuff that like kind of like fleshes their arcs out a little bit.
To feel like a sequel to that show, then it's like, oh
yeah,
no, I mean,
then it's like I'm totally in. But I like Ezra's arc in that show. I think it is interesting because he's a little more complex. He kind of does feel like Starkiller from the what do you call it, the Force Unleashed games. So and I like the touch. Also, I just love the lightsaber style.
There's a little bit of you go ahead. Yeah.
Oh no, I was gonna say just the art style of the lightsabers. I just love the little sticks. It's like very like concept art for Star Wars.
Yeah. I was gonna say I like yeah, you're right. It does kind of look like the like those initial like sketches. I will say though, I like you mentioned Force Unleashed, and I think there is a kind of a because I think with Kanan, I get a little bit of a what was the name of the mentor character in that movie? In that game, sorry.
Yeah, no. I feel like that was completely ripped out of the games. I forget his name too, but yeah, that was
Coda, that's it, Ram Coda. Yeah, like the blind guy. I think those like they took little elements of that, and I really liked those elements in that game. So it was nice to see them worked into this show.
Yeah, for sure. Just quickly addressing the chat here. So Brian McMahon says the writers screwed Hayden. Yeah. And I would agree with that. I think while his acting could have been better,
he was directed to act that way, though, is the thing. Like,
well, yeah.
I mean, you got people like Natalie Portman, who we know is a great actress, doing stiff, wooden, shitty performance too. So I think it is definitely not Hayden's fault at all.
No, I totally agree with that. Dennis S says Rebels has some amazing stuff, but it's very little, and all the awesome character moments are built around already existing characters. Yeah, I totally agree. We just kind of covered that. Ahsoka, Maul, Obi-Wan, Vader, 100%, and that's where that's where Rebels is at its best. Okay, so moving on now to number 9. What do you got?
Number 9, I've got Revenge of the Sith. And that
damn you
wraps up all of our prequel stuff.
How dare you? How dare you?
10? That's like almost smack bang in the middle.
That's rude. That's just rude.
Good. It's good. It's not great. It's good. I like Revenge of the Sith. I think history has been very kind to Revenge of the Sith, and I think maybe some people are a little too kind on it in retrospect. I think maybe the pendulum swung too far the other way. It's a good movie. It doesn't deserve to be lumped in with the rest of the prequels. It has to be, obviously, but it's a good, well-made movie. It's a little like self-indulgent sometimes in terms of its pacing. I think it just goes on for too long sometimes. especially in the action scenes. I think I don't mind long action sequences, but oh my god, like that opening stuff on like the Battle of Coruscant is awesome, but it also takes like 20 minutes, and then the final battle, awesome, but then it gets like it was supposed to be an emotional, dark moment for all of these characters is drawn out so we can have these big stunt spectaculars. And I know a lot of people rail on the prequels because of like the over choreographed battles, and I like the over choreographed battles. I think for the time period, for like what they're sort of showcasing, this Jedi at their peak, that's all cool. But the one battle that shouldn't have been overly choreographed is, and not in every section, there are parts of it where you can really see the emotion, you can really see like the sort of raw anger, but then there are other parts where they're just like swinging on chains, and like it's like, this doesn't need to be in the movie, guys. Like, this would have been more effective if it was simpler and shorter and more like aggressive, animalistic. And I think it just moments like that where it's like, I like what you're doing, George, but you just need to cut it a little bit. Like all the stuff on Utapau, it's like, this is cool, but also completely irrelevant because you're killing off a character we just met.
The problem with Grievous is that he's very irrelevant.
Yeah, and
he's a character who's improved by the Clone Wars, though. I will say
they do basically to keep Obi-Wan busy while Anakin gets seduced by Palpatine, because that didn't happen in the previous movies when it should have. So you have to put it in this movie, which means you got to keep Obi-Wan busy until you're ready for him to fight. And it's just like, okay, George, I think I've said this to you before. I think the problem with, and again, I'm not shitting on it, I really do like this movie, but I think it's hampered by the other two movies in the trilogy not really knowing what they were going for. I think George figured out what he wanted to do with the prequels at Revenge of the Sith, and then had to play catch up, and it bloats the movie. But for what it's worth, it is a very entertaining movie, and it's a great score. I mean, like, was it Battle of the Heroes?
Yeah, Battle of the Heroes, man. Yeah, and I mean, listen, I get what you're saying about the overly choreographed nature of the final battle. I don't know. It still works for me, though. Just like I'm gonna be honest, man. I miss those epic lightsaber duels. Like, I miss that in the sequels, because like even
we're hampered by the fact that there's only 2 lightsaber wielding characters to duel, I guess. So
yeah.
Rise of Skywalker, there's just like 3, 4, 5 battles with just Rey and Kylo Ren. It's like, okay,
yeah.
You should, at this point, if you were going to make Finn force wielding, should have given him a lightsaber and a chance to duel, because it would have made things more interesting. But
I mean, 100%. Yeah, no, for sure. Going back to the chat here, let's see. 2 words, Darth Plagueis. Gonyai says 2 words, Darth Plagueis. Yeah, that scene
is best.
Yeah, it is. That is when it's at. But actually, I'll go a step further. I think the best scene in this entire movie is when no dialogue is said, and it's before Anakin, goes to stop Mace Windu from killing the Chancellor. That is, I'm like genuinely like shocked that a scene like that made it into the prequels. Like, that George Lucas wrote a scene like that, because it is so unlike anything I've ever seen from him before.
Unlike some of the other moments of like impressive cinematography in the prequels, it's very clearly not a digital shot that was made on a computer. Like, he had to put a camera down, actually shoot a scene, and then go into the editing bay and create drama through the editing, and he did it. And it's like, that's the old George Lucas. It's like, oh, it's so good to see you back. 1 second.
I know. Even if for a second, in the John Williams score is so chilling. It's God, I love it. And you know what? While we're on the topic, no one ever says this, or I mean, I think people are starting to come around on it. But dude, fuck Mace Windu, man. He is the worst. He's like such an asshole, man. He's a colossal dick, and they definitely don't shy away from that in the films, but like in this film especially, it's like you've got a guy on here who's like borderline, not even borderline, he's just absolutely unhinged. He's like having an identity crisis, and Mace is just around here just treating him like shit. Like,
that's the thing.
It's like trying to provoke the, like, like a shooter or something like that.
Yeah, it honestly is. It's like, go ahead, shoot him. That's basically what he's saying. I think for me, I mean, the Jedi being shitty people is one of my favorite things about the prequels, but it's like George didn't really realize that's what he was going for, and then he's like, "Oh wait!"
Until the third movie,
like,
yeah.
I mean, there are moments of it in the first two movies, especially when they're like shitting on baby Anakin, and then again when like they become generals. But
well, that's the thing. Is like I think where he excelled with it was in his depiction of the council. Like the council was always
clear, though. I think it was pretty because he couldn't help but write Yoda these like long philosophical monologues, and it's like when you do that, when you make Yoda right, it kind of undermines the whole point that you're trying to make, which is that the Jedi are wrong, And then he finally in this movie just says, "Fuck it, let's just make them unrepentant sons of bitches," and they are.
Yeah,
it's great.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Especially Mace Windu. What a jerk.
He's the worst, man. He's the worst. Going through here just real quick before we move on to the next one. Marvel Guy says, I really like Revenge of the Sith, and it's even better with the Clone Wars. And that's exactly how I feel. I think that actually both prequel film, well, Attack of the Clones like less so, but Revenge of the Sith especially is it gets a massive boost because of this series. And the characters do as well. It's like we actually get to see the camaraderie between Anakin and Obi-Wan. And I know we'll touch on this a little bit later on, but completely agree with that. Brian McMahon here with some nice, kind words. Great show here. Your Westworld shows brought me here. Subscribe. Well, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate that. I'm glad you liked the Westworld recaps. And I'm glad you're having a good time here. And then to close this off, 1999 says, Revenge of the Sith is my number 3. Nice. I'm not too far away from you in my ranking.
With Revenge of the Sith, as opposed to the other prequels, I really can't begrudge people for liking it more than me. It's not that I dislike it. It's more that I just like other movies more than it. So
sure. Yeah. So that was your number 8, right?
That was number 9.
Oh, that was number 9. Whoa, wow. We spent a lot of time on that.
Yeah,
it's okay. Number 8. Number 8. What do you got?
Crucify me for this. It's Rogue One.
Oh!
I like Rogue One. It is actually, I think, legitimately.
Yeah, just like you like Revenge of the Sith. All right, I see where this is going.
In the middle. It's in the middle. I think Rogue One is a fun standalone movie. I think a lot of people shit on it because it's like, oh, who cares where they got the plans for the Death Star, whatever. It's like a line of dialogue that they expanded into a whole story. Maybe it's because I grew up reading all these expanded universe things. That's kind of I like that stuff in Star Wars sometimes.
Yeah,
like not every story should be that, but I like when every now and then it's like, oh, here's this little thing that you didn't think was interesting, but we're going to tell an interesting story in it. Like it was more sort of an excuse. They said like, we want to make a war movie. Oh, we can tell that story, and so then they just sort of, for the sake of telling that story, just extrapolate on that one little detail, and it's great. It's a lot of fun. The characters are really the weak, and you'll disagree, and we'll get to that one.
I do disagree, but that's okay. That's
sacrilegiously high ranking for it. But but I think the characters are fine. They're serviceable. I've grown to like Jen Erso a lot. I don't care about anyone else. I like what's his name? The droid.
K2SO.
I like him, but
he's great,
and it's a good performance. But all the other characters, I just don't really give. I'll add Galen in there as well. Galen, Jen, and my boy Benny Mendelsohn as Krennic.
Dude, Krennic.
If they would just, if it was
he's
just
the best. He's so good.
Honestly, the movie I think would have been greatly improved if they were less side characters. I love all the stuff with, them. And I love all the stuff with what's his name as well, the blind Jedi and his friend.
Chirrut and Baze.
Yeah. I like them too. It just doesn't really fit in this movie for me. I think it distracts from the story I was really invested in, and as a result, they sort of get shafted and they're barely in the movie. And then there's like Bodhi, the pilot, god awful.
Yeah, he's definitely the worst. I would not say he's god awful.
Cassian's like, he's just a Han Solo, Poe Dameron, like. Rogue.
No, don't even go there. No way. No. I totally disagree with that. Cassian is actually one of the more interesting characters in this because he is like in a similar like morally gray scenario or situation. that Jin is in. And it shows the lengths that the rebellion would go to in order to fight back. It shows their desperation.
But that's the thing. His sole utility is as like a plot device. He serves.
I disagree. No, I don't think that's a plot device. No
being
way.
a stand-in for the rebellion, which is fine, but I don't really care about him.
Yeah, but you get a personal touch to, and like there is, like, through the conversations that he has with Jin, it's like, it's not a lot, right? I mean, and granted, the film is focused more on Jin and the mission than it is like everyone else, but like I still feel like they gave you enough in there that's like, okay, I get this guy. I get where he's come from and why his mentality is the way he is. I mean, the first time we see him, he's literally murdering an informant in order to, like, you know, stick it to the Empire.
Interesting. I think there's just nothing about him below the surface, and I don't know. It just doesn't work for me. But the characters are fine. They're serviceable. The story is fun. I like the main character, which is, you know, really all that matters. And I like the villains. So and the third act it's like watching a game of Battlefront. It's great. Which, I mean, I say that
it's everything I've ever wanted.
It's probably the most, like, in terms of special effects, the most visually stunning.
It's unbelievable.
It is just it's gorgeous. I like the beach setting. I like all of that stuff.
Oh my god, Scarif! Whoever thought of Scarif as a planet and as a setting, that's a stroke of genius. It's like a mini invasion of Normandy. It's unbelievable.
It's a really cool, like, little set piece. And so I like the movie. It just, again, another one of those things where I just, because of the characters, there are other movies that I enjoy more. I like the Darth Vader scene. A lot of people have, like, sort of turned on that one recently, but I think
what the fuck? Like, that was everyone's favorite scene when that movie first came out. And I like understood.
It's more of like a surface level sort of scene, which I get, but I also think that kind of, it's fine. Sometimes it's cool to watch someone be badass. So
for real, I mean, it's like the only time in a live action setting that we've seen Vader in his prime fighting someone. You know, like, obviously, A New Hope, very uninteresting lightsaber duel, but, like, I get it. Empire Strikes Back, it's good, but it's like I don't get a sense of you know, Vader's, like, true power. Like, I want to see Vader at the height of his like power, like, just ripping people to shreds, like, because we never get a sense of that in the films.
I think for me, I think a lot of people's problem with it is that it's like you spend the whole movie sympathizing with these rebels. They try to make you, like, feel really bad for them, and then the last scene is, oh, look how cool the bad guy is, which I understand, and I think that's a perfectly fair.
It's Darth Vader. Like,
that's the thing. I think I understand where they're coming from, and I can't begrudge them for feeling that way. But for me personally, I think it's effectively, like, it is badass just because we know who Darth Vader is, and anything he does is going to be cool to the audience. But I think if you put it in the position of the rebels, it's horrifying, and I think that
that sequence is like a horror story. Yeah. I don't know what you like.
A big slasher scene, so from that perspective, I can make it fit with the rest of the story. But I mean, like, if you don't like it, that's fine. I mean, do you? Whatever.
Well, I'm gonna stop this dogging on Rogue One right now. But going back to the chat here, Dennis S says, whenever I watch Rogue One, I just start at the beginning of the third act. I'm sure many feel the same way that you do. It's the greatest third act in any Star Wars film. I'll say it. Like, I don't even care, man. Like, I like it better than anything in the original trilogy, the prequel trilogy, sequel trilogy.
It's not emotionally gripping, but in terms of action, it's very, very exciting, and that's
I think it is emotionally gripping. Yes, but I also think it's emotionally gripping. We'll get to that later. Karen Langer says, do you guys think that Rise of Skywalker undid Anakin/Vader's redemption arc by bringing Palpatine back? I sort of feel like it undoes Vader's sacrifice. What do you guys think? I know that's a big point of contention for a lot of people. A lot of people feel that Rise of Skywalker is kind of a slap in the face to Anakin. And I get that. I do. I think there's a way you can bring back Palpatine that isn't like a slap in the face to Anakin. Unfortunately, they did not do that. And so I feel like it's it's dumb, and I totally get where you're coming from.
Yeah, I think for me, and because I had the same thing, I think it is still on paper that, in the same way that I think a lot of stuff in the prequels is kind of bad until you extrapolate on it in things like the Clone Wars. I think for me, the way I've, as a fan, have made sense in my brain is Anakin defeats Palpatine, restores balance, and then Palpatine, being like the twisted evil individual that he is, perverts nature to extend his life. And so then, Rey and the Jedi have to come along and finish what Anakin started, quote unquote. So it's not so much that her fixing what Anakin failed to do, and it's more sort of her combating Palpatine's resistance to the natural order. So I don't think it makes Anakin a failure. I think it's more just sort of that makes sense for Palpatine as a character. The problem is the movie kind of hints at this and then never really explains what's going on.
And then you find out that he was just cloned by a bunch of these Sith followers that we know literally nothing about. So it's,
but I mean, him being a clone, I think makes that work even more. I mean, it is a perverted, unnatural state that he's in, and I think honestly that makes it better. If he had just fallen out into space and then been saved, I think it's like that stretches credulity a little bit. But yeah, him being in a clone's body, this unnatural beast hooked up to these machines, keeping him alive, I think that's cool. I think that works as a continuation of Anakin's story rather than like a complete replacement of it. The movie just needed to do a better job of explaining itself. And I think honestly, I think this is one of those things that kind of works in spite of itself rather than because of something the writers tried to do. I think the writers didn't think of this. I think they just did things without thinking, and it only accidentally somehow a little bit makes sense. So, I mean,
yeah.
Rise of Skywalker, baby. We're gonna talk about this the whole
I know.
time.
It's something that we can just kind of go into nonstop here. But okay, so moving on to, I believe, what are we on? Your number 7?
Number 7, yeah. My number 7 is The Force Awakens. I think The Force Awakens is a good, fine piece of movie. I think things like Solo make it better. I think, and I'll come back to this in a little bit, I think The Last Jedi makes The Force Awakens a better movie, a more interesting movie, at least. I think it justifies some of the like pointless repetitions and makes them mean something. So all that being said, I just think it's a fun movie. I like the characters we're introduced to. I think J.J. Abrams is very comfortable when he's introducing ideas. So even if they are just sort of like derivative, I don't know. Yeah, it's a fun time, and I think it in tandem with The Last Jedi is excellent. It's just it gets hurt a little bit later on when you watch The Rise of Skywalker. But we can't talk about that movie the whole time. I swear to God.
No, I know. We can't. I think what's interesting is I actually have Force Awakens lower on my list. Although maybe that was to be expected. I have no idea.
I think your enjoyment of The Force Awakens was hampered a lot more by The Rise of Skywalker than mine was.
Yeah.
Mainly because I think you liked J.J. Abrams a lot more than I did. So
I did before The Rise of Skywalker.
It was just definitely affected everything a lot. I mean, like I already thought the guy was kind of like mediocre. So he made a pretty good Star Wars movie, and I was like, okay, cool, nice. And him making a bad Star Wars movie was sort of like, well, I don't know what I expected. But
sure.
I mean, like it's a good movie. I like all of the characters it introduced. I mean, I just think, I don't know. I think it's a really fun little thing. I don't really have a strong
for sure. I mean, that's the thing when it comes to that movie is it's just like it is sort of a retread of A New Hope, but it's got like new flourishes and touches in it. I think it did a great job of introducing a lot of things, but like in the grand scheme of things, when you see where those like interesting things end up going, it just, you realize that it's all for nothing. And now I understand people can still watch it and still enjoy it and still, love what they were going for. But I think, at the end of the day, it just, I don't know, man. Like I just, now that I see where JJ took it, I'm just kind of like, all right, it's even worse than I could have imagined. So
I
for
think,
me, that's why it takes a little bit of a dip.
yeah, I think for me, like in the same way that we sort of mentioned with the Palpatine thing, that it was kind of accidentally, it worked accidentally. I think a lot of the stuff in this movie is similar in that, like, I think he just sort of vaguely hints at ideas that might be interesting without having any real plan or interesting direction to take them in. But that's all you really need for a setup movie, so that's fine. Whereas in the final movie, you need a little more than that. And I think that's honestly because I think like on the surface level, all the vague little things he sets up could be interesting, or they could just be like incredibly derivative and repetitive and cliched. And I think the reason I look back on this movie a lot more kinder is because the second movie dared to do something interesting and provocative with those setups. So it's like I can't help but now look at them as one big story rather than two separate stories. So
yeah. That's totally fair. And I think a lot of like whether or not The Force Awakens still works for you, that kind of it depends on how you view The Last Jedi, for sure.
And the Rise, I mean,
well, yeah, I mean, if you are someone who likes Rise, then obviously that doesn't really pertain to you. But I mean, obviously for the people who don't like it, I think, yeah. Anyways, okay, so moving on to number 6. And while you talk about this, I'm actually going to switch over to my webcam because my camera is like burning up right now, and I think it's causing me to lag. So, yeah. So while I'm doing that, Brody, number 6.
Number 6 is The Mandalorian. I really like The Mandalorian. I think everything this way up is excellent, like sort of just unequivocally. And I think The Mandalorian is it was a little slow to start, I think. I liked the little episodic nature of it. I liked the way it was sort of bouncing from one little self-contained story to the next. But I don't know if it just wasn't. It didn't really grip me completely until that last arc, I guess, that last couple of episodes. That's when I was like, oh, okay, shit, okay. Now, like with the stuff with like Moff Gideon and all of that really captured my attention. And I think going forward, this has the most potential to keep going up, because if everything is as good as that last like 3 episodes, fuck yeah, we're in business.
Yeah. I think my
last 3.
Because yeah, you said the last 3 episodes of that. I think, where do you have Mandalorian 6? It's actually a little lower for me, and I think the problem with it is that I was just expecting something a lot better than what we ultimately ended up getting. And it's fun. I appreciate the little slice of life kind of approach they were going for, but at the end of the day, I was just like, every episode kind of continued to underwhelm me to the point where it's just like, I don't really care what's going on. This doesn't seem like it's going anywhere. And I know that's an incredibly controversial opinion, because I know everyone loves The Mandalorian, but like, yeah. I don't know. It's like, if I never watched another episode of that show again, I wouldn't be mad. And listen, I love the finale. Like, I think they did an excellent job of really hooking you for a season 2, but this show to me hinges on what they can do in season 2, because if you look at everything else Filoni's been a part of, Clone Wars, Rebels, all that stuff, they all started out with a rocky first season, and I think probably intentionally so. But then when it kind of progresses onward, that's when it really hits its stride in like the later seasons.
Like that, yeah. Like, you got to find your feet, and then when you find your rhythm, you can take off, or you can crash and burn. I think for me, I think the reason maybe that is such a polarizing first season, and I think I've heard other people say that too, so it's not just you, but I think it's because those first 3 episodes kind of feel like, oh, everything's like building momentum, it's one continuing story, and then the last 3 episodes are kind of like, oh, everything's sort of resolving in one continuing story, and then the middle couple of episodes are just little episodic things. And I think people in those first 3 episodes are like, oh shit, okay, this is gonna go be some like ongoing long story, and then they were caught off guard when it just sort of changed gears for a couple of episodes, which is understandable. I mean, that's something like, it is kind of shocking when it, like, if you're expecting one thing and you get another, and then it goes back to the thing you thought it was going to be in the first place, it might be a little jarring. But I liked it. I learned to live with that sort of discrepancy. But
yeah, no, for sure. And I get that. Real quickly addressing the chat. Dennis S says, really excited for season 2 of The Mandalorian, especially because of Ahsoka. She's my favorite Star Wars character. Ahsoka fucking rocks, and I can't wait to see Rosario Dawson play her. I think that's pitch perfect casting. So
yeah, it's gonna be fantastic. I mean, it might be another one of those things where the show gets taken to the next level the more it ties itself to the Clone Wars.
Yeah, man. Again, like it's Clone Wars, dude. That there's a reason it hasn't been mentioned yet. And then Dennis also said Taika did an amazing job with the last episode. Yeah, I agree with that for sure. And listen, I'm not like
what gets me super hyped for his movie.
Yes, that does get me excited for his movie. I'm still not 100% on board with him doing a film. I think there's like other people I would have preferred more. This is a big tangent, but yeah, no, I do agree that last episode of The Mandalorian is excellent. Okay, so moving on now, let's see. Okay, so that was your number 6. All right, so we're gonna go back now to 10. For me. Again, guys, be sure to let us know your ranking of the stuff down there. If you're watching this live, if you're watching this on the replay, thank you for sticking with us. I know we're very long-winded, but let us know your 10 through 6 in the comments section.
All right, like,
but listen, I know. Come on, you got to talk about it. Like, you can't just say, "Oh, this one's here," and then this one's here.
It could literally take us 2 minutes, but that would be.
Yeah, but then what's the fun in that? I apologize if my. Yeah, I apologize if my video quality is lagging. My computer is freaking burning up right now. That's just the price I pay for using a laptop to stream. So okay, so going into number 10. So number 10 for me, and I'm not going to really talk about this too much because we've already spent a lot of time talking about it. But number 10 for me is The Phantom Menace, for basically every single reason you said. It just feels so detached from the rest of the prequels. Again, there's some major lulls in that film, but there's also some incredible action, and it's one of John Williams' best scores. They waste Darth Maul and they waste Qui-Gon way too early, but thankfully they're brought back in Clone Wars in a very interesting way. And so the characters kind of feel improved in that regard. Young Anakin, probably not the right way to start with that character. But what I will say is I really liked Naboo. I don't think Lucas gets enough credit for creating Naboo, and that basic Naboo essentially informed the rest of the universe. The rest of the universe has this super fantasy aesthetic to it, which is so different from anything that came before it, and I love that. That's one of my favorite parts about the prequel. So Phantom Menace, it's got its ups, it's got its downs. I don't hate it as much as most people, but it's definitely lower on my list for a reason. Here's where it starts to get even more controversial. Number 9 for me is The Force Awakens, and it's because of The Last Jedi. I think that just seeing everything that was set up and where JJ ultimately concluded them, it just retroactively ruins this movie because nothing matters anymore. All the mysteries he set up and all these cool things, it's Rian Johnson took him one way, and then JJ was well, I don't like that, so I'm going to go back to what I originally wanted to do. And it's just cheap nostalgia porn. And listen, I love this movie. I loved this movie when I first saw it, and I think it's got a brisk pace. It's got great energy. It actually has a lot of JJ style in it, which helps, separate it from the original Star Wars while still being a similar thing. But, man, I don't know. It's just frustrating for me. I love the final lightsaber battle with Finn, Rey, and Kylo. It's great. It's really primal. Obviously, the killing of Han Solo, I think, is done excellently. Really anything with Ben is excellent, and I love the formation of the Poe and Finn bromance. It's so great. I think the thing I love about this movie specifically is just the character interactions, the natural chemistry that kind of flows between everyone. and there's some exciting set pieces in here. Like the Falcon chase on Jakku is amazing. The fights in the temple. I forget what planet that's in, but
yeah,
where Maz's castle is, when the Resistance kind of comes in, and then like Kylo's there and whatnot. Like that's all really cool. I'm actually really not a big fan of the third act of this film because it's like they're trying to do A New Hope all over again, and except it's just like not interesting. The only interesting part about that is the lightsaber duel, but ultimately this film for me, it just hinges on where they took the story, and since I was not a fan of the two films that came after it, this movie gets a massive downgrade for that reason. Let's see. Let's look at the chat here and see if anyone's getting mad at me. Let's see. Okay. So here we go. Brian, these guys are pretty good here with the analysis. Well, thank you so much. That means a lot. We spent a lot of time talking about it, and so it's always great to flip on a camera and talk about it in front of you guys. Karen Langer, she said, wow, Griffin, I never realized that about the Force Awakens, Last Jedi movies, and I recently just rewatched them. Great take. I can watch you guys for hours. Listen, I guess everyone's loving our takes, man. This is great. You all are very
controversial, yeah.
Yeah, too controversial. I'm glad we're making our points, solid points here. So, okay, so that was my number 10, or I'm sorry, that was my number 9. Moving on to number 8. I think for a lot of these, like we have overlap, but it's just like placement wise, which I'm actually a little surprised about. I thought it was going to be a little bit more drastic than that. But number 8 for me is The Mandalorian. Basically, for all the reasons that I said when you mentioned it, it's not that it has to be consequential, but it's more of a slice of life kind of thing. And if you dig that, great. It definitely plays into the Western aesthetic that they were going for. There are just a few episodes that feel like it's wasting time, and I don't understand that when it's only like a 30-minute long adventure. I don't know. The show is really just like the adventures of Mando and Baby Yoda, and people like that. I think for me, it ultimately came down to like what I expected to get out of the show. I expected like HBO level, like hour-long epic episodes that was like this guy dueling the underground, a Western set in the Star Wars universe.
Although I think the production value is like HBO grade.
No, I 100% agree with that. They delivered on the production value, but I think the story is where it loses me. It's fine.
And honestly, I mean, next
it's just unremarkable.
With like now that the mystery has been somewhat unraveled, not completely, but now that we know that there's like an antagonist, season 2 may be a little more sort of punchier, I guess.
And that's kind of what I was hoping, because you're right, there is sort of just like a lack of an antagonist throughout the course of this season. It's just kind of like he goes jumping from planet to planet, and like that's fun for like a couple of episodes, but after a while I want to get somewhere. I want to get to a story, and for like the amount of time and money that's devoted to this thing with the talent involved, I really was expecting something more. But my placement of this season could change by the end of next season. It's just I only have one season to go off of, and I thought out of all the Star Wars material that came out last year, while The Rise of Skywalker was my least favorite, this was probably my second least favorite. And then like Jedi Fallen Order was like the best out of the three. So yeah, I don't know. I'm sure there are plenty of people who will disagree with me on that, but that's just kind of where I stand for that. Number 7, we'll go to that real quick before we address the chat here. So number 7 for me is Return of the Jedi. Big shocker here, because I know people love this movie. I think
people are a little more like derogatory to this one of all the original ones, I guess. So
and I understand why. I think the writing's a lot weaker in this film than the previous two movies, and it's something that like immediately sort of you notice immediately when you're watching this movie. one of the big issues for me is, and it's weird because Revenge of the Sith does something similar, but it works. Whereas like in this movie, they have this like 30-minute long thing in Jabba's palace, and like it's cool for a little bit, but it's like, where are we going? Can we just kind of like pick up the pace and like get to what we all want to be here for? And Jabba's palace
we came for Jabba's palace.
Well, we did not come for Jabba's palace.
We came for
I'll tell you that.
You better fucking believe we came for Jabba's palace.
We did not come for Jabba's palace. No way. Cool action, great moments. I mean, obviously the little like head nod thing that's been like parodied to death now is amazing. And like I love how you can see Luke's transformation immediately in that opening, but I don't know.
Watch Return of the Jedi tonight. Ooh.
Yeah, I know you're feeling
telling me on it.
Honestly, what it comes down to is like this movie. It's the ultimate like climax. It's the ultimate just fulfillment of. Ultimate wish fulfillment. You know, it's amazing. The third act between the three battles is unbelievable. The lightsaber duel, the Endor battle, the space battle, it's all like operating at a high cylinder. I think the journey to get there just isn't as interesting to me. And why the love triangle between like Han, Luke, and Leia? I've never liked that. I never thought that like Luke and Leia ever would have been interpreted as like a romantic sort of relationship. They definitely had more of a it was like a friendship. And which is why the sibling thing makes sense to me.
I think for me with them, what's interesting is I agree. I mean, it might be partially because our entire lives they have been siblings. We never knew them before that. It's always been like a package deal for us. But that said, I agree. I think there's like a little bit of a hint in A New Hope where he's like a little defensive when Han asks if she'd be into him. But then by the time of it, the infamous kiss in Empire Strikes Back, I didn't really read that as her being interested. It was more to get under Han's skin. And Luke doesn't seem like he's like, oh, hell yeah, I got a kiss from this hot chick. He's more sort of like rubbing it in. I never really got romance from him. So you're right. I think that is one of the weaker elements in this film. Luckily, they don't spend too much time on it, but
they don't, but it
seems like it's more in Han's head, which is I think the reason it works for me is he seems defensive because Luke pretty early on learns that she's his sister. Yeah, and then withholds the information for an ungodly
so weird. Yeah, right.
But,
I know.
I'll tell you later. It's like now. Tell her now.
She's like, tell her like what's the holdup here?
Yeah.
Which I guess that's like a criticism you can make of Empire because like he. If there is a criticism you can make of that movie, but
I think maybe he was withholding the information because he wanted to go confront his father first, and he didn't want to put her in danger or somehow associate her with him. Which is why when Vader sort of senses it and starts threatening her at the end, he goes ballistic.
For sure. That totally works for me. I love the Emperor in this. It's great. And I think Ian McDiarmid he just knows how to play this character beautifully. And and Vader's redemption is beautiful. The father-son dynamic. Like I said, everything in the third act of this movie, great. The journey to get there. Like the going through Endor, seeing the Ewoks. The Ewoks don't annoy me.
Like the Endor stuff.
Yeah, the Endor stuff is it's just tedious to me. I'm like, okay, what are we doing here? And also I just don't like the way Han was written in this movie. It's not like a betrayal of the character, but like it feels a little off to me. And it definitely does. And I think he definitely should have died in that movie. Had it maybe been written a little differently. But I mean it's. Oh,
my issue with them. Well, I was gonna say I'll talk about this more when I get to it. But I think my thing with Return of the Jedi with the middle section, I like all the stuff on Endor. I think like there's some fun stuff going on there. I like the speeder chase. I like the Ewoks.
Speeder chase is good.
I don't really hate that at all. I like the way that Luke uses the Force to sort of trick these people into thinking he's like 3PO is a god. I think that's fun. The only issue with it, when you look back on it, is trying to figure out what happens when. It's sort of, there's no logical through line to any of it. So it's like,
Yeah, it's just kind of like
is the speeder chase before or after this? And when did they go to the village? And when, like, there's no like really logical through line to it, which I think maybe makes it feel a little meandering and
it definitely it definitely does meander.
It is the weakest part of the movie for sure.
No, for sure. Okay, going back to the chat here real quick. Dennis has a nice little comment in here. He's saying, yay, compliments, y'all are great, but if you don't reconsider and put the holiday special at first, I'm gonna spam you on Twitter. The holiday special is number one. You caught us. And he says this is a lot of fun. Well, thanks for tuning in. Glad you're having a lot of fun. Gagne1 says Baby Yoda healed the fandom. You know, you might be right on that. You might be right.
Baby Yoda did. Brought us all together.
Definitely did. Let's see. So then Karen Langer has a question here. She says, do you think The Mandalorian is kind of way too Disney? I can't remember, but I don't think a single person was killed, but correct me if I'm wrong. But Disney needs to stop being so safe. Yeah, I think it's probably a little more edgy than I was expecting, to be honest. I think but I agree. I think there are some moments where I think they probably could have leaned more into the peril, like the stuff with I think the best example of this probably for me is that episode where they go to save, where Mando goes to save Baby Yoda, and Baby Yoda's being experimented on, and I expected it to be really grisly, and then when it turned out not to be anything at all, like I didn't expect Baby Yoda's head to be split open or anything like that, but I expected maybe like to be a little like, oh god, this baby, what are you doing? And it really wasn't. And I think that was maybe the one time in the season where I was like, maybe be a little edgier than that. Like, come on, I want to feel like the Empire has bad intentions here, and I mean they just kind of were scanning him, which is like, I mean, fine. Yeah, I know.
Nice, but it also doesn't like, I'm not terrified for Baby Yoda.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, so I can sort of see that. I think honestly, going back to Rebels, one of my problems with Rebels is that it's a little Disney sometimes in terms of the violence. I think like there seems to be no point in which anyone is like genuinely. I don't know. I guess like no one's in genuine peril because no one ever seems to die, and like the stormtroopers always get knocked out or tased or whatever. And it's like, I can live with it. It is a kids show after all, but there are
I do agree that there is like an active attempt to just prevent killing or carnage, which is a little frustrating. But it's funny you mentioned Rebels because Rebels is my number 6.
I planned that segue.
I know you really did. It was perfect timing. Yeah, and listen, I remember when I was binging through this show when it was first on. Actually, I watched this week to week. Wow. And you know, back when people would buy episodes on iTunes and stuff, I bought like all the seasons of Rebels and fucking blew through this thing. This show hits its stride once it introduces Thrawn.
Yeah,
Thrawn is one of my favorite, if not my favorite character from the EU, and the way they integrated him in this was perfect. The Mikkelsen brother, I forget his first name, that they got to play him was perfect. When they try and explore the mythology as it pertains to the Force at large, and the Jedi and the and the Sith and all that stuff, like perfect. I even love the episode where Ezra goes back in time to like adjust moments that have sort of happened. I know, I like it and I don't like it. I like it from just sort of like an Ezra sort of like going through like a life-changing event and like kind of learning from it, but I don't like it because, again, to what you're saying, it does kind of double down on the feeling inconsequential, something that is really apparent in that show more so than Clone Wars or Mandalorian. I really liked the characters and I liked their bond, and the voice actors who played them are excellent. But it is definitely softer and lighter than Clone Wars, and I don't think I was initially expecting that when I started watching it.
I think
so. In like the droid-centric episodes, they're so tedious and annoying, but you feel like you have to watch them. And like Hondo is obnoxious in this show more so than he is in Clone Wars. Actually, I'd say he's unbearable in Rebels, whereas like in Clone Wars, where in Clone Wars he's like, I'm like afraid of this guy. Like I don't know what he's gonna do, and like what they kind of turned him into in Rebels is weird. But I loved how they brought back Rex. I loved how they brought back the clones and Ahsoka. All of the it's just when it hits those highs, it's excellent. But like it takes a little bit to get there. And I think basically the big thing that we've been saying throughout this entire conversation is that some of the best material in Rebels is not necessarily inherently the Rebels stuff. It's when it's harkening back to characters from Clone Wars. So, and that's kind of ultimately how I feel about it. But I love it. I love the hell out of that show.
I also, I mean, I guess it's the nature of where it falls in the timeline. I do kind of sometimes miss the like the war centric episode, like nature of Clone Wars, where it's like this is a battle, this is a battle, this is a battle, and I get you can't really do that in Rebels because it's sort of set before the the big operation to blow up the Death Star and all that, and so you can't have a pre Death Star, pre Scarif large scale battle. But
before you go on with that, I was going to say my biggest problem with this was the fact that they didn't do what Clone Wars did, and they didn't tie in directly to Rebels. Like to Rogue One. The entire time I'm watching this, I'm like, I want to see an overlap into Rogue One. I want the final episode of Rebels to be Rogue One. And they didn't do that. And we saw what happened with it with how they did it with Clone Wars in this final season. And it's just like, oh my God, it was perfect. So why they refused to do that is kind of beyond me,
Yeah, and I think honestly, going on with what I was saying about the lack of battles, it's forgivable. I mean, given where it falls in the timeline, but I think it's noticeable because every single operation they go on is basically the same thing. It's like we got to do a stealth, espionage mission. It's like we've seen a lot of these. It would be nice. It didn't have the variety, I guess, of set pieces that Clone Wars did.
Yeah, for sure.
They were limited by where the story was set. But I mean, maybe in another series we'll get something more akin to Clone Wars, because I know they will never let go of the original trilogy era. So
it's the one thing forever. And that was that was the one thing that made me apprehensive about that show, is I just wanted to move past it. But I actually ended up liking what they did.
And Rogue One is so high.
It's the only shocking. It's shocking. Okay, so Dennis S says the Inquisitor was really cool at first, but he just can't do his job, and therefore it gets less and less menacing. The other Inquisitors are just comical afterwards. Yeah, I totally agree with that. The Inquisitors were
the Inquisitors after after the first Inquisitor, we probably didn't need another Inquisitor. But
yeah, I mean, it was a massive bust to me, which is why Thrawn. They should have had Thrawn from the beginning, man. Like that was kind of a big mistake to me. But cool. Okay. Actually, Kieran here, he asks, let's see if we can pull that. Does Brody have a channel? Brody does not have a channel. Brody has a Twitter account where he likes to voice his hot takes. And we do a lot of podcasts and content together. So he'll pop on here from time to time. But anyways, so that was my number
guest.
Let's see. Oh, right.
YouTube
Rebels was
stuff.
Brody is the he's the equivalent of a couch crasher on YouTube. He'll hop around from time to time. So okay, so now we're in the top 5, guys. We're stretched here. I know we've been going for like an hour and a half. I'm sweaty. It's hot in here. I can hardly breathe. My computer's heating up. It's burning up. I don't know. It might be broken for all I know. But we're gonna finish this. I'll be damned if we don't finish this damn ranking. So moving on to number 5. Brody, hit us with your number 5.
Okay, so my number 5 is A New Hope, which I feel guilty putting it this low, but it's top 5, so it's really not that big.
Actually, that is my number 5 as well.
Perfect. Oh, look at that. Wouldn't you know? A New Hope it's classic. It's great. It's a phenomenally made movie. Obviously, it's started this whole thing. I think, honestly, it's just I think the only reason that it's here and not higher is that it doesn't have all the extra stuff that would be later on added to Star Wars. Like I think Empire Strikes Back onwards, it becomes more of like this massive epic space opera. And that's just personally what I like in my Star Wars. And there's a little bit less of that in this. It's just a great adventure though. All the characters are really well defined. I don't think that's primarily because of the script. I think it's because of the way the actors sort of injected personality and the way they got along. I think the reason everyone tries to replicate that original trilogy trio is because they didn't even need a script. They just had this like natural innate chemistry. And I think it's what keeps this movie going. And that includes not just the trio, but that includes like Sir Alec Guinness as Obi-Wan and the rest. I mean, even I like the chemistry between Tarkin and Vader. I think they have a great dynamic.
I love Tarkin. He's one of the hidden gems of this film. Not hidden gems, but he's one of the underrated gems of this film.
Yeah. And I think it's surprising that he has so much chemistry feels like the wrong word, but it is the word to describe his chemistry with Vader. I mean, it's surprising because he's talking to a man in a suit who isn't even the voice we're hearing on screen. So the fact that they have that kind of relationship just is a testament to Peter Cushing. But I mean, the movie, I mean, technologically, like from a filmmaking standpoint, is breathtaking.
It's revolutionary. I mean, for sure.
We hear all the time about how Star Wars was saved in the edit, and it's one of the best edited Star Wars movies. There's not an ounce of fat on Star Wars. It is beginning to end. Everything is essential. Everything is where it needs to be, and it's exciting. It's a great movie. It just, I think I'm so invested in the mythology now of Star Wars that going back to it feels a bit of a regression. It's like, this is before.
I agree, and that's ultimately, I think that's ultimately why it's why I have it placed there as well. There was a point in time where I actually had Force Awakens above this because I thought it did the similar thing, but it just had a little bit more energy to it. But now, with everything that's happened in the sequel trilogy, that thing's got to be taken down a notch. But it's really interesting, though, because one of the things that I praised The Force Awakens for was that brisk energy and that cutthroat pace, or that breakneck pace. And that's something we don't really think about it, but that's something that this original film has. This movie really moves. It's amazing how fast we go from sequence to sequence, yet we get everything we need, and we fall in love with the characters immediately.
The fact that Han Solo isn't introduced until halfway through the film and you wouldn't even notice looking back on it, you just sort of feel like, Han Solo had perfect amount of screen time in this film, and I didn't feel like he was underserved as a character. And yet he didn't really show up until 40 minutes in or whatever it is, 45 minutes. It's unbelievable. Like in any other movie, I'd be like, I wish that character had been in the movie longer because I really liked them and I feel like they weren't in it enough.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't even meet Princess Leia until over halfway, and yet everyone's going, oh man, they really underserved that Princess Leia character. She's I don't know. It's just such a lightning in a bottle. It really is. It
is. That's the perfect phrase for lightning in a bottle. And the climactic Death Star sequence is just amazing. I actually, call me crazy, I prefer it to the Death Star 2 battle in Return of the Jedi. And I think it's because all of our main heroes are involved in the same battle. I also just kind of like that it feels a little bit more like militaristic than Return of the Jedi, and that's probably because Return of the Jedi is just kind of like balancing multiple sequences at once.
I like the Return of the Jedi space battle, but the only reason I like this one more, well, not the only reason, but one of the main reasons I like this one more is in this one I'm like, what's going to happen next? And in the Return of the Jedi one, I'm more like, okay, we're going to get back to Luke on the Death Star.
That's the main thing. It's the involvement of the main characters in the central, blowing up the Death Star.
Lando flying. It's like, okay, I like Lando, but I don't really care.
It looks cool, but No, listen.
Although
A New Hope is
that final run through the interior of the Death Star. After the Vader's sacrifice is pitch perfect. That's the best part.
It's I love that. And then it just blows up and spits out the So good. No, yeah, for sure. I listen, this movie is just great. It's a classic for a reason. I do agree with you. I think the writing is a little weak, and I think it's actually pretty apparent right off the back that George Lucas doesn't know how to direct actors, because Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill are not the best in that film. But I mean, it's great. It introduced us to the entire franchise. I think, just similar to what you were saying, I want a little bit more out of my Star Wars now, having been like entrenched in it for a while, and so it just sits a little bit further back. So, all right. Moving to the chat real quick, checking to see what people are saying. Oh, okay. It's just like Gagne is talking about some Captain Phasma and stuff like that. We'll get to that a little bit later. So let's try and breeze through some of these rankings first. So, okay, moving on to number 4. Brody, what's your number 4?
And number 4 actually perfectly segued again. It's Return of the Jedi. I think Return of the Jedi is fantastic. It's a good movie. I don't understand. I mean, I do understand. I just, the first act I think is brilliant. I love all the stuff on Jabba's palace. I think in terms of giving us one last like action adventure moment for the heroes before things get really serious is exactly what this movie needs, especially after the darkness and the more like cerebral nature of the last movie. And I mean, God, J.J. Abrams should have taken notes when he was making his movie, because instead of just getting it out of the way and then continuing with the plot, he tries to drag out there. He's like the kid who doesn't want to leave like summer camp, where he's like, I don't want to go, so I'm going to keep doing it despite how badly this story is suffering for it. And they had the good sense to say, okay, you get your big last adventure because we're going to rescue Han Solo, which is something we set up in the last movie. Awesome. Han Solo's free now. Now go do the movie. And I mean, yeah, the second act is a little bit like up and down, but I like the through line with Luke. I think it's, until The Last Jedi, it's I'd say it's his best Star Wars performance. I think he's just, he conveys that change in Luke so well.
I agree. Yeah.
And then like, then the third act is top tier Star Wars. Like,
it's great. Yeah.
Is what I think of when I think of Star Wars. It is perfect. You've got the I mean, not even only this, like when Luke first meets with Vader and they're like comparing lightsabers and just talking father son, and there's just, on paper, that could have been so dumb. Like on paper, it could have come across like, I hate sand, but the actors, the blocking, the heightened theatrical nature of it sells you on the drama. And then when you get to the Death Star and you get like that extra element, which is Ian McDermott as Palpatine, it's just amazing. And the worst thing that has ever happened to this or anything in Star Wars is adding the no over.
Oh, it's true. Listen, we're not even talking about the special. Those are
favorite special edition. I mean, like, I can handle all the other crap. That's the worst one, because it took a scene and it made it stupid.
It's oh god, it's bad. But some of the worst stuff is some of the worst adjustments. I think Lucas butchered Return of the Jedi with the special edition.
Yeah, I think
dude, he got rid of Yub Nub. He got rid of Yub Nub. What the hell, man?
It sort of felt like, I think he could, because Richard Marquand is like less of a auteur. He kind of felt like he had more ownership over the film, and so he decided he could just do whatever he wanted to it. Whereas I think he was a little more restrained with Empire. A, because I think people love it, and B, because Irvin Kershner is a little more established as a filmmaker, and so he felt it would be inappropriate for him to go and slice up someone else's film. But I think with Return of the Jedi, he felt like, this is basically my film. I can do whatever I want. And man, even the Jedi Rocks song in Jabba's palace, which took what was just an innocuous bit of set dressing before the actual scene and turns it into an entire dance sequence. Like stuff like that. But I mean,
bad.
That aside,
very bad.
That I won't hold that against the movie, because those were done to the movie against its will. The movie itself, fantastic, really good stuff. And Luke's green lightsaber, are you fucking kidding me? That's awesome.
Oh, it's great. Yeah. No,
we need more. we need more colored lightsabers. Why didn't Rey have a yellow lightsaber the whole movie?
That is a great question. Why didn't she? These are the real. You're asking the tough questions that I wish I had answers
to the wrong person. I
know
with J.J. Abrams.
Yeah, with JJ and all them, and Chris Terrio especially. Okay, so moving on to number 3, Brody. Right. We're in the top 3 now. Home stretch. What do you got?
They're all perfect. Just as a disclaimer, so no one hate me. Number 3 is the Clone Wars, the TV series and the movie and everything.
Respect. I respect it. Yeah, I respect it.
Clone Wars is. It's got low moments. Like there are repetitive arcs, and they're like. I mean, I've never been huge on the clone centric arcs. I like it there as for texture, but in terms of actually like enjoyment, it's like I kind of get lost in the fact that it's just one guy talking to himself the whole time. But
but it's not like
I mean, it's not. And I do appreciate what they do in terms of like humanizing, the clones as individuals, despite them having the same DNA. I get that. I like that. But those sort of drag for me sometimes. But the highs of this show, and there are a lot of highs in this show, is some of the best Star Wars that's ever been written. It's thoughtful, it's philosophical, it's exciting. It never really sacrifices anything to it just has its cake and eats it too. Like especially that final season, obviously those last 4 episodes, if they were on their own, it would probably be at number 1. Like it is it's just as a whole, there are like, it's a little more nuanced, but oh my God. Yeah, no, it is just a fantastic little series. And I'm so glad
it's riveting.
And the fact that it introduced like Ahsoka and turned Ahsoka into this fan favorite character. Everyone hated her at the start.
Well, I mean, she was terribly written in like the movie.
And it just insists that you like her. And then eventually you're like, well, shit, I do like her. It makes up for all of the character deficits that Anakin has prior to Revenge of the Sith. It's the best thing to come out of the prequels by far. And honestly, if the prequels as films weren't necessary in terms of like setting up the overarching plot, I would just say forgo them and just watch the Clone Wars, because this is everything that era of Star Wars. Everything good about that era of Star Wars, I should say. I mean, bringing Maul back, things like that, which
that shouldn't work. That shouldn't work, and it's oh man,
they turn him into an actual character is the thing. I love. It's like this kind of unhinged, angry, jealous, petulant, like lost cub, and
and the thing is like when it's all said and done, it's just like he never was able and the way he's defeated and like the way he's defeated in like every single time he like goes up against someone, it's just like, oh well, he's all look. He's not there's they literally take that like the fact that he looked really cool. I killed him in the first movie, that they turned it into personality, which is amazing.
I so like I mean like I could gush and gush and gush. This is a great.
No, and we'll gush some more when I reveal it on my list. But listen, out of all the prequel era is my favorite era of Star Wars. Just in terms of just like what's going on, the look, I feel like it balances the sci-fi and the fantasy perfectly for me. So like Clone Wars, super high on my list, which we'll get to a little bit later on. Okay, so let's go on now. Or sorry, I was going to address the chat here for a second.
Do it.
Let's see. Gagne says, Jedi Luke is everything we wanted Luke to be. Green sabers go so well with black. I will second that times 10 times a million. That is so true. Great color coordination. Okay, so Marvel guy.
It's so simplistic, but I love when like when like it unfolds and there's the white. And it's so cheesy, but it's great.
It's great. It's the best. Marvel guy says, I like the Coruscant scene in the special edition, but we really did not need Jedi rocks or the Gungans. Yeah.
Oh god, I forgot about that.
The celebration that doesn't bother me, because it's like, okay, now that we have the prequels, we're like showing the larger world.
What bothered me more is that it like these planets look like they were completely they look like stock like images of these planets from the prequels. It's like did nothing change on these planets after the galactic? There's no ruins.
Collapse of the Republic.
Yeah, it's like oh yeah, the main like temple on Naboo looks fine, and everyone looks fine, and I don't know. It's like I think I would appreciate those scenes more if there was like some destruction, like some visible wear and tear of this war ending.
No, I think that's
signs
actually
of rebellion in some way. I mean, not to praise Rise of Skywalker, but at least we saw like ships falling in the background of their celebration scene. Like at least there was some kind of like indication that something had happened. But
yeah, no, that's totally fair. Kieran Langer says petition for Brody and Griffin to write, direct, produce, and star in the next Star Wars trilogy. Listen, you've been tapping on you've been knocking on Lucasfilm's door for ages. Specifically to do an Indiana Jones movie, but but maybe Star Wars is our real calling. Dennis says Clone Wars is so hard for me to rank because some of it is top tier, but there are also like Jar Jar and droid arcs.
Yeah.
The way I look at it, I totally get it. The way I look at it, each Star Wars movie kind of has those moments that you consider Jar Jar or droid arcs. So I don't hold it against the series too much. And specifically with the Clone Wars, you can skip over those episodes if you want. They're just there as, actually some of them do give great development to the characters. So it's like, I don't hate them, but I get where you're coming from. Mm-hmm. Let's see. Marvel guy here. He says, I grew up with the prequel era and I absolutely love it. Yeah, it's same with you. I think we're both kids of the prequels. And I think maybe part of that is why I just enjoy that interpretation of Star Wars a little bit more. But totally right there with you. All right. We're into the top two, and I'm not going to have you reveal your number one yet, but
I mean, it'll be obvious by the time I say
it'll be obvious after we do this. So maybe
top two, and then
do your top two. I guess we'll just go. It doesn't even matter. Number two. What do you got in number two?
My number two, and this is where everyone's going to not ask me to direct a Star Wars movie anymore.
Yeah, that's okay.
But my number two is The Last Jedi. I think fantastic movie. I don't even care. I'm not even listening. I just think it is everything that I liked about Star Wars in all the other things, distilled in a really affectionate and loving way. And I know people seem to have this idea that Rian Johnson hates them and hates Star Wars, and I don't get that. I don't see that. For me, and it, sort of tying back into what you were saying before, because I think a lot of people also have problems with the fact that, it doesn't follow on from the last movie. And I don't think that's entirely true. I think the fact that you get like I get an F in the chat from Donald Trump. So
it's okay. I was waiting for you to see that.
But I honestly, to me, it's that like you have all these setups, right, in The Force Awakens. They're just setups, right? They could go anywhere, they could do anything, and really most of them was just sort of ideas that people took and thought, I guess this will go somewhere eventually, because they didn't really get any answers in that movie, primarily because of the way JJ makes films. But I mean, everything that's set up in that movie is paid off. Like, you have Luke on this island, and then the movie focuses on why Luke is on that island. And then you have like Snoke. Who is Snoke? Well, Snoke is the one thing holding Kylo Ren back, which we get in The Force Awakens. And then the movie says, let's look into that. And then just like you go Finn didn't really finish his arc in this film. He was fleeing, and then he went to go save Rey, and then he got knocked out, and so what's his deal? And the movie's like, he actually has to figure out what he wants to do, kind of like how Han Solo at the end of A New Hope is like, I'm joining the rebellion. Well, not even doing that. He comes back to save Luke, and then in the next one, he's like, I'm getting the hell out of here now, and he has to find out a reason why he wants to stay. That I don't know. There's just moments in the film that are set up that the next movie, you might not like where they go with those setups. That's completely up to you. That's personal opinion. But I think it's ignorant to say that, just because it didn't go the way I thought it was going to go, or just because it didn't do what I prefer to see in Star Wars. Therefore, it isn't following on. It is, like I said, it zigs instead of zags, instead of walking things back like the way Rise of Skywalker does. And so, but I mean, like, I don't want to play the defense the entire time I talk about this film. I think there's just a lot to love, like, inherently, without having to, defend it. I love the stuff they do with Luke. I think they were given this premise of Luke has fled to another, part of the galaxy, and he's hiding because he feels like he left, like, he let his nephew down and betrayed whatever it means to be a Jedi. And the movie doesn't, like, scapegoat that. The movie says, okay, that's the premise. So what could Luke have done? What would Luke have gone through to make him do the thing that he did as established in The Force Awakens? Well, it has to be something pretty serious. It has to be something emotionally difficult for him. I love the way that we talked about earlier about how, like, Luke in his black outfit with the green lightsaber, that's like peak Luke. He's like on top of his game. He's the hero. He's the guy. And the movie, The Last Jedi, says, okay, what if Luke thought that about himself? What if he got a little high on his own supply and thought, I am the hero, I'm the guy, I defeated the Empire, and got so arrogant in the way that the Jedi in the prequels got a little high on their own supply and said, like, look, all these, 1,000 years of peace, look at what we've done. That they didn't really realize what was happening right under their nose, to the point where they do something completely irrational that ends up creating a problem that didn't need to be a problem at all. Like him turning on Ben, even for a split second, creates his own problem in the same way that the Jedi completely botching Anakin's training blows up in their face. And so I think, like, it took what was like, a derivative film, a repetitive film, which is The Force Awakens, and said, it's repetitive on purpose. History repeats itself when we fail to learn from our mistakes. And the end of Return of the Jedi, they defeat the Empire, and they do the thing, and it's all good and happy. But did they really solve the problem of why the Empire arose in the first place? No, because the prequels hadn't been written yet, so they didn't really know why. You know what I mean? And so when you look at the overall arching story of Star Wars, it's just sort of like bad guy, bad thing happens, they defeat bad guy. And I think what The Last Jedi does for Star Wars, and what the sequel trilogy should have done if it had actually committed to this instead of, shitting out a terrible third entry, is, okay, how do we stop this from happening again and again and again? How do we actually change, this cycle? How do we break this cycle? And that's what the film is to me. It's breaking the cycle. So I don't think the subversions are, like, aimless and pointless. I think the subversions are there to say you have to actually look inward and change if you want to actually see the change in the world that you want to see. So I mean, on that, like, philosophical level, that's totally in line with what I think George Lucas was going for in the prequels. It adds depth to the previous movie. It adds depth to the whole, like, arc of Luke's character. I love it. And I know, I'm seeing in the chat people disagree, and that's fine.
No, for sure. But I think the big thing, I think the big takeaway that I'm seeing from the chat is that people disagree with you, but they really respect where you're coming from. And actually, I'm going to bring this comment up because I think this is actually kind of key. He's Ashton Springer says, I would say that the Last Jedi themes and how the Jedi is dead idea should have been where we started in The Force Awakens.
I agree.
I completely agree with that. If that was the direction that they wanted to go with this, and that was something that they really wanted to emphasize, the hubris of the Jedi and how it led to the downfall and the rise of Kylo Ren and the rise of this First Order, that really should have been, they kind of should have alluded to that in the first movie.
The reason the reason I agree with that, and the reason it isn't the case, is because they hired a director who didn't have any idea for what to do with Star Wars. He just knew he liked Star Wars and he wanted to make a film that paid tribute to Star Wars, and that's fine. But then you can't sustain a trilogy on that. And so then when Rian Johnson comes along, he's like, well, I have to actually do something with this setup, because like I said before with, like, the gymnastics routine, if your second maneuver is just you continue walking along the plank, you're not a gymnast, you're just doing a tightrope walk. It's boring. And so he couldn't do the same thing as The Force Awakens again. He had to do something. And in a perfect world, yeah, the story would have started there because it's far more interesting of a story. But
yeah,
he worked with what he was given. And honestly, I think it actually enhances that movie because, like I said before, like if you start off with this derivative, repetitive, like pastiche of Star Wars, what better way to justify that than to say repeating the mistakes of the past is the problem? That's what we're addressing. So you need to sort of, it's like the, you have to do like, you have to establish, I guess, the problem, and then you have to deconstruct the problem, and then you can solve the problem. And Force Awakens establishes a problem, even if JJ didn't intend it to do that. Last Jedi deconstructs that problem, sort of finds out what's the solution to this problem, and then the problem is the Rise of Skywalker just doesn't even bother to fix the problem. It just makes the same mistake that the movies were trying to illustrate. So
for sure,
everything feel limp, which I mean that's just your mileage will vary on that. It really is personal preference, but
yeah,
I think it's just a fun movie. I think there's some fun stuff in there. I like all the stuff with like the Skype calling between Rey and Kylo Ren. I like Rey and Luke's chemistry. It's like a little antagonistic. It's different from Luke and Yoda's relationship, but also similar. There's like parallels, but it's a different like power dynamic. And then, I know. I just think I love all the stuff. Shoot me if you want. I don't hate the stuff with Finn. I think all the Finn stuff is fun. And I like the idea that it actually decided to do something with him being a clone, a former stormtrooper, and going and having to finally confront that in a meaningful way instead of just making a joke about putting Phasma in a crash compactor. Like actually saying, okay, he actually has to face her now. He has to do something of worth with that. And in the process, learn what it means to be a rebel rather than just being anti-First Order and running away from them. So
yeah, I think that's fair. There's I don't think Benicio del Toro's character is needed at all, and I could go into I could go into reason like fill up a whole other podcast with like some counterpoints to this, but I think I totally understand where you're coming from, and I think ultimately what it boils down to is, do you buy into where Ryan was taking characters and how he interpreted what was going on? Because there's no debate. It's a expertly, beautifully crafted film, and it perfectly realizes his vision. It's just whether or not you dig that or you don't.
And I mean, like, I think it is down to personal preference, and that's. I mean, I won't begrudge anyone for not jiving with it. I've tried to convince you. It just sometimes
it's not gonna happen. You got me on Iron Man 3, so I know you still have a little bit of hope. But like,
well, I should soften your opinion, so that's something. I'll take that as a win. But
I mean, like I've always understood that. I don't hate the movie. It's just not. I don't agree with the decision.
Yeah, I mean,
for sure.
Fine. Like, there are plenty of movies that I like Rogue One. I don't hate it. It's just not for me. Like, I mean, it is for me. I like it still, but it's not like my first pick would be. But
for sure.
You know what I mean? So like, I think for me, I don't know. It's a shame there's so much vitriol around it, but I mean, I think it is fun that we get to talk about it. I like combative discussions, so it kind of works out for me. But everyone else, it kind of becomes unbearable. So
no, for sure. All right, so let's head on over to my list. I already talked about my number 5, which is the original Star Wars, which we've already covered, so I'm going to jump right into my number 4, which is Revenge of the Sith. Fucking adore this movie. I love how operatic it is, how epic it is. It's like if all Star Wars could be like that, but with better writing, that would be the ideal scenario for me. That's the key. With better writing. That's the key. Listen, I adore the action sequences. I think the fall of Anakin probably, not even probably, it shouldn't have happened so soon. It definitely should have, been explored in the previous 2 films, but when it happens, man, does it crush you? Do you feel it? He goes around like killing those kids, and like the death of the Jedi is like super depressing. And that's actually one of my favorite sequences in the entire saga. Anakin versus Obi-Wan is legitimately, I not even legitimately, it is my favorite lightsaber duel ever. I just feel, and I think one of the reasons why is because I feel the emotions more because of the Clone Wars series.
Right.
Whereas like in the film, I get that they were really good friends, but they're not together as much as they should have been. Like we should have seen them, you know, fall on that nest of Gondarks on wherever, with that they're talking about in in the second movie. But ultimately, when we know where this story is heading, and so to see it fully realized, to see Palpatine, see him poison the mind of Anakin Skywalker and lure him in there, is expertly is perfectly realized. Obviously, it could have been done a little bit better, but I think for what we got, I get it. I think it works.
I think like I said before, I think it just is forced to do a lot of heavy lifting that I think is a little unfair on one film, you know.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, someone in the chat here brought up a really good point. He said, great discussion. The silent look on Obi-Wan's face when he rises back from Mustafar after killing Anakin still haunts me. You feel every emotion on his face. I thank you for bringing that up, because that is a moment that goes overlooked. It is it's great. I mean, first of all, Ewan McGregor is exceptional in these movies.
Really rises above the material. Like,
yeah, like this film in particular, you just feel how taxing everything is on him, and you feel how like genuinely upset he is at what's happened, and how like this whole disaster could happen. Yeah, I don't know, man. But and I think the thing I love about it is that while it's a film that is incredibly dark, I mean, I believe it's the only, not the only, before the sequel trilogy, it was the only PG-13 rated Star Wars, which is kind of crazy. But the thing I love about it is that while it's shrouded in darkness, and like while you see so much just like destruction and death and evil going on in it, it ends on a hopeful note, which is super powerful. It's Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru, or whatever, I think that's her name. I always forget it, but you see them looking out at the sunset, you know, kind of like what Luke did, and I just think that's a perfect way to cap off that prequel trilogy. It's beautiful, it's poetic, it really, you know, it shows that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. There is a salvation, and so I love this movie for many reasons. And a lot of it, yeah, you're right. Maybe part of it is I look at it a little bit, you know, through rose tinted glasses, just because I grew up on these films. But
that's what happens. I probably am softer on this movie than I would be normally, even though it's not like in my top 5 or anything like that. But I mean, like, I do have like nostalgia for this movie and for all the prequels, really. Episode 2 was my favorite when I was a kid. Like,
sure, episode 2 was my favorite for a while when I was a kid too. But no, Revenge of the Sith just brings it all home, and it's John Williams' best Star Wars score, hands down, bar none. I'll say it.
I think it's just a movie that is burdened with too much to do, and I think like
that's fair. If like they had set it up more in the previous 2 films, this film would have been a knockout of the park.
It's like a recurring thing with all the like prequels and sequels. It's like I don't think these trilogies start where they need to start. And I think, I mean, like prequels, I mean, the prequels had the benefit of having like an end goal in sight, in that it had to end with Darth Vader becoming Darth Vader. But it is directionless in the same way that I think the sequels are directionless, in that they don't really know, film to film, they didn't really know what the overarching story was, and George Lucas was just kind of figuring it out as he went along. And then he finally hit some really good ideas in episode 3, and it's just like too little too late. But
sure,
it makes for a great movie. It's a long, bloated movie, but
sure,
it had to be. I mean, I'm happy he made the movie the way he did, because as bloated as it is, I think the ideas that he introduced in this movie make Star Wars better. So
yeah, no, I think that's a really, really good point. Okay, moving on to number 3, which I believe is your number 1, and that is The Empire Strikes Back. Wow. Yes, number 3, folks. Number 3. I'm gonna wait. What you're trying to think of what's left? Yeah, this is it's a real toss up here, guys. We're gonna talk about Empire once we get to it on your list, which is your number 1.
Mm-hmm.
Number 2, we already talked about a little bit, but we're going to talk about it now. My number 2, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to shock a lot of people, especially if you follow me. My number 2 is Rogue One.
Oh no! Oh my god!
Yeah, yeah. I know.
Holy shit!
Yeah, I know. People aren't expecting this. But people are expecting. Listen, if you follow me for any amount of time, you know, Rogue One is my favorite Star Wars movie ever. And I get a lot of weird looks when I say that, because people are like, really? Like, why? And I guess for me, it boils down to the fact that for as many films in the Star Wars universe as there are, I have always wanted to see a war movie from the ground level, from the soldier's perspective in this universe. It's called Star Wars, and I never felt like we got the wars until this movie. People will say
1 and 2 are both war-centric.
Exactly, because I know it is. Maybe I'm just like a very violent person. Who knows? No, and maybe my opinion on this film is a little bit skewed.
You were like, this better have fucking battles in it.
Yeah, right. I think maybe my opinion on this is a little skewed because I read the novel Star Wars Catalyst before seeing this film. So the characters of Galen Erso, the characters of Director Krennic, and Saw Gerrera, like they're all like perfectly realized in that film and their relationships. And you get a sense of Galen's place in the Empire and how much his daughter really means to him. And I think they do enough in the movie to,
I agree,
hammer that home. But the book like enhances it tenfold, and it's really hard for me to separate those two entities from I'll never know what it's like to see the movie without having read that book. So
right.
Yeah. So it's like maybe that affects my opinion as well. But I also just really like how it tackles the morality of this time period. This is basically the onset of the Galactic Civil War, and similar to really like any civil war, you see like there are people doing like morally gray things on both sides. Obviously the Empire has their people, and we've seen plenty of that, but this is the first time we really get a look at the rebellion and the desperation they're facing and the lengths that they have to go to in order to just strike one blow, because they have not been able to strike a blow up until this point. This is the first thing that really sets the entire original trilogy on a course. And I think you get this ragtag group of people together that believe in a cause greater than themselves, and believe in doing something to give this cause hope, even if it means sacrificing themselves. To have these basically no-name people that we now learn about, I think is so human and powerful. And to me, this is Star Wars's version of The Dirty Dozen, which is I absolutely love that film. And so to kind of see them do that to get the war elements with the personal journey that Jin goes on, and resenting her father for so long because of he was considered a traitor, but then to learn that no, he was just doing this because he had to, and you were the key, and I'm gonna I'm gonna design this system so that you can secure the plans and ultimately destroy it. It's just really powerful stuff that feels rooted in real world politics and conflict, but is obviously heightened for Star Wars. And that's what I've always admired about it. Is it just even the people, while people say the characters don't get enough development, I think they're given the right amount of development. And Chirrut and Baze, I love what they try to do with them. They're not Jedi, but they're people who are in tune with the Force. I think that speaks to to people who are not necessarily like hardcore practicing religious people, but they believe in faith, they let that guide them. And it opens up the mythology in a way that is powerful. And especially like, I know I'm going on for longer than I anticipated, but like,
I mean, that's what our number twos are going to be, our ranty ones.
Yeah. I think when it comes to Saw Gerrera, there's an interesting dichotomy between him and Jin, where it's like, and even Cassian to an extent, where it's like Saw Gerrera is someone who's been in the fight longer than anyone. He's seen like the worst of it. Oh yeah, he's actually that's true. And you see how like it's warped and twisted his mind, and to the point where he's just like a fanatic. He's even too rebellious for the rebellion. I think that's like a really interesting point to make. And so Jin sees that, and she obviously doesn't want to go down that path. And Cassian sees that. It's like, well, he's made morally questionable decisions in his life. When they kind of see the extreme of that situation, and like it affects them on their journey, I think. And so yeah, I love the character work that's done in it. I think it's the beginning is a little briskly, it's too quickly paced. It kind of jumps around a little bit, but then once it settles in, you really go on this fantastic journey that feels true to Star Wars, without incorporating like people that we know or Jedi and whatnot. And then obviously, I mean, I can't talk enough about the third act. I mean, that thing gives me, it's like strapping in for the roller coaster ride of a lifetime. Like, it's just, I remember seeing that and being floored the first, like, it's fucking incredible.
It is. Yeah. I think for me, I mean, like, I don't want to discount anything you've said, because I think you make some really good points, and I'm really glad you appreciate it on the level that you do. For me, the characters is, like I said before, is kind of my weakest spot. And it's not so much that I don't think they're developed enough or even likable, like, or whatever. I think it's more so that a lot of the characters to me feel like bullet points. Like, oh, this is this character and they do this and this. And this is this character and they do this and this. And this character does this and this. And it's like, okay, but I personally was hoping for more. I think when I watch a war movie, it's like I want to really feel like I know these people, and I just don't feel like I know these characters. I know Jen only because her and her father had this relationship, and I know Krennic, but
I didn't even touch on Krennic. That guy.
Everyone else, I feel like it's just like, okay, I'm in the trenches with you guys, but I don't know who the fuck you are, and it kind of, for me, detracts from that a little bit. But but I will say, in terms of like a positive thing to say, I love the way that it sort of leans into it being Star Wars, but not really. Like, I do like, I think one of my favorite things about the movie is the shot of the very first shot. Almost, it's I think it is the first shot, when it immediately just flashes in, and then you're moving past the asteroid belt, and it kind of looks like the Star Wars text moving by, but it's not moving up our screen. It's sort of to the side, almost like this is a side mission. This is not Star Wars. This is Star Wars from another angle. And that brilliant, perfect way to start the movie. I don't even know if that's what they were going for, but that's what it looked like to me. And
I mean, I think that they were definitely on their mind. Yeah.
I mean, I hope so, because it's great. But later on, I love all the other little instances of that, where it's like, this is Star Wars, but from a different perspective. I think the problem is, like, I really loved the like Chirrut stuff. I just wish I almost like that stuff too much, and I wish it was in a different movie where I could actually appreciate the whole, like, believer versus, like, agnostic, like, fallen from faith kind of person. I think that's a great story, a great dynamic. It just doesn't really get any time to shine in this story. It's kind of just set dressing for this story, which is fine. I don't know. I kind of wish there was more. Same with like the stuff with like Cassian. Again, I don't really care for him as a character, but like the idea of like doing a whole story that's built around the moral grayness of the rebellion cool, I could watch that. That sounds fun.
Yeah.
It just sort of ends up being pushed to the wayside because we've got to do a story about like hope. We've got to find our hope, and it's like, okay,
Yeah, and sure, yeah, I totally get that. I think it either hits people or it doesn't. The last thing I'll say about this is just like I think it's outside of The Last Jedi, it's the best looking Star Wars film
I
out
agree.
there.
They're
It's,
both
I
gorgeous
love
films.
like something I love about Gareth Edwards is how he depicts size, and just like how he depicts the oppression of the Empire. I mean, this is legitimately a ground level look at society under the Empire's regime. It's all gritty, it's filthy, it feels lived in. It's like it harkens back to A New Hope without feeling like space junk, I guess you could say, which is kind of a vibe I get from that original Star Wars film. No slight against that movie, but
Right.
yeah, but anyways, no, I've gushed about this movie for long enough. It's kind of amazing that it actually is only number 2 on my list and not number 1. It's just I have such an affinity for number 1. Which actually we probably should just talk about. Well, before we talk about that, let's address the chat here real quick. Almost going on 2.5 hours. This is impressive, guys. We still
sticking with us.
yeah, you guys have been amazing. A lot of people are shocked that Rogue One is my number 2, and totally get it. It's a very outrageous take for some people, but you know. Gonyai says Donnie Yen's blind warrior is super likable. Totally agree. I think he's one of my favorite characters in the thing, or in the movie. Marvel Guy says Rogue One has an amazing third act, so I don't blame you for the number 2 spot. It's the best third act in any Star Wars film. I'll flat out, I'll say that. Let's see. Oh, here we go. And then Kieran Langer says, you guys putting Rogue One and Last Jedi at number 2 are amazing takes. I don't necessarily agree, but those are very controversial takes. I respect, and your explanations and opinions are amazing. Listen, I really appreciate that. It's good to know that we can defend our hot takes.
Yeah, that's actually it's a huge relief. Otherwise, we're just 2 idiots screaming into the void.
yeah, for sure. All right. So now it's come down to this. Here are our respective number 1s. We'll do yours last because yours is the more traditional one, and it's most people will probably agree with you. Mm-hmm. But for me, my number 1.
I think mine's too conventional. People are going to disagree just because it's so conventional. But you go ahead.
Honestly, it's conventional for a reason, and it's fucking amazing. But for me, number 1 is the Clone Wars, movie series entity, that whole thing. That is my Star Wars. That's where I want to just live in that era and experience the Jedi at the height of their power, the battles, the stories that come out of it, the exploration of the Force that deepens the mythology, the way that they introduce these incredible new characters, and have us immediately fall in love with them, and then have them end up being some of the best written characters in Star Wars, period. How they're able to take a throwaway villain like Darth Maul and turn him into one of the most compelling bad guys out of the entire saga. As opposed to you, I really like the clone-centric arcs, and I think
I don't hate them. I appreciate them more than I enjoy them.
Sure, I think my favorite thing about those arcs is that opposed to the stormtroopers and opposed to the faction, the grunts that came after them, the clones, they had their own personality. They were it's really funny because it's the Empire went on to get rid of clones and just recruit people. The First Order even did that, where it's the clones who are manufactured in a lab, who should theoretically just be the same person and have no personality at all, have more personality than those people. They actually have souls. And so we see that explored. And my favorite part is when the Order 66 is executed, and then you see some of them fight back about that, even though it's programmed inside of them. You see there is a hesitation. I love what they did with Rex, who, by the way, Captain Rex, controversial opinion, outside of Obi-Wan Kenobi, Captain Rex is my favorite Star Wars character.
Holy shit.
Listen, maybe
Rex is
maybe
great. So
maybe it's just the fact that I love the clones, and I love the action sequences, but like, dude, he is just, and I love his dynamic with everyone, and just exploring him as a person.
he was
And
like really he's that guy, he's that friend you have that's sort of just like really good friends with everyone somehow.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you have this much time to be this friendly with everyone?
Yeah, no, and for sure that's actually really great. And I love Fives, and I love the exploration, like how they show a clone who's gone from like, you know, not being able to pass his tests to like, him being one of the only troops out of that battalion to like reach a level of success that he has. And I just kind of love that through line throughout the entire story. There's episodes of Jar Jar and there's episodes of droids, but I don't hate them.
I don't hate them either. I like the one where Jar Jar has a girlfriend. I think that's kind of
I don't hate it either. And my favorite part about it is how it dealt with the politics of the time in a way that is accessible for younger viewers, but like it just, you get it more. Honestly, as an adult.
Some of my favorite episodes of the Clone Wars are Padme episodes. I think of all the characters in that show, I mean, Anakin obviously gets a big boost in terms of character, and so does everyone. They make me like Padme, which I don't otherwise. Like, it is unbelievable. Yeah. Which I think is integral, because if you're telling the story about how his love for her is what dooms him, it's kind of an important piece. And this show really, without beating you over the head with it like episode 2 does, it really just makes her an interesting person. So you go, oh, I can see why Anakin likes this girl so much. Like, yeah.
And you talk about other characters from the prequels that get a boost. General Grievous is scary. He is scary in this. And I love that it's like in the first or second season of the show where they show his lair and they kind of just like allude to his backstory and how he doesn't really like believe in anything. He's just like this ruthless killer who's in it for power. And I know that originally Grievous was supposed to be kind of like a precursor to Anakin, kind of like some sort of like a parallel or something to him. And you see hints of that in there for sure in his ruthlessness. But like Anakin actually has a soul, so it's like, I don't know. And I love, how pathetic they made him at the same time. It's like while he's like this ruthless killer who like treats it as a game almost, he's kind of a coward. And we get a hint of that in Revenge of the Sith, but I love how it's focused on in the Clone Wars series. And I love Obi-Wan's entanglement with him. The thing I love about this series is how it like we always think of Obi-Wan as this just like truly great, truly just, straight Jedi who's just followed the code his whole life. But he's got a bit of an ego to him, and that ego ends up like kind of hurting him a few times. Like his entanglement with Grievous, the frustration of not being able to kill him or capture him or whatever. Obviously his romance with the Princess of Man or the Duchess of Man. The whole Mandalorian stuff is exceptional. I mean, I don't know. It's so hard to talk about this show because there are so many things that you could go into.
It's such like a series. That's what's so hard about it.
Big series, and like the Mortis episodes are perfect. Even if some of it is a little too on the nose, it is a kid's show, so I get it. But like that stuff is amazing. The Maul stuff, the stuff before Maul was so much. Like that, dude. That is violent. That is so dark. Like,
I can't believe they got away with that.
I know. The kids show. Holy crap.
None of the prequels character that I thought like I really appreciated a lot was Dooku. They don't do a ton with Dooku, but I do like. But I mean, like they do enough. He serves his purpose. But I just love the way he's kind of portrayed, because he's so inconsistent in the movies. He's just sort of there because they need a bad guy. And I mean, he's an old man. He's kind of a lame bad guy next to like someone like Darth Vader or Darth Maul or something like that. And I think what's interesting is that in the Clone Wars, they kind of just turn him into like a political actor. He's just a guy who's there. He's a good administrator. He's really good at getting things organized, and he's also he might genuinely believe in the cause that he's fighting rather than just sort of the puppet master like Palpatine is. And so and then I also love his relationship with Ventress and how that ties into Palpatine, and you sort of see how Palpatine operates as a figure, because you see that through Darth Maul, but you also see it through his relationship with Dooku and his relationship with Ventress. And yeah, it just makes everyone's relationships richer, which is good Star Wars, man.
Yeah, no, for sure. Sorry, my webcam kind of like lagged out a little bit. I'm like switching between cameras here. I don't know what's going on, but no, I 100% agree with you in terms of Dooku for sure, because it's like, yeah, he's definitely a character that needed to be explored more. Just in general in the films, but like in this, they do enough. You get a sense of who the guy is for sure. And
he's kind of just a distant person, and I think that is reflected in how he's portrayed in the show. So,
yeah, for sure. Going in here through the chat. My computer is gonna die, man. This thing's done. So Mitch, my good friend Mitch, actually, he's in here. Thank you for watching, Mitch. Really appreciate it. He says, yes, the Clone Wars. Dude, Clone Wars is awesome. Give me all the Jedi battles for sure. Yeah, those some epic stuff is in there. And then something else that Marvel guy said I think is interesting. Definitely something that I thought of when I was a kid. He was saying when I was little, I just wanted to be a Jedi in pre-Order 66. And I think that's a really great point. Like the prequels explore the Jedi in a way that is just like, it's mystical, it's magical, it's like cool. And then it's like taken all away. So it's like, I don't know. It's just, I've always like enjoyed that time period. For sure. Let's see if I can get down here to the comments. This computer's done. I'm telling you, man, I'm lagging hardcore. So, but anyways, you guys know the real number one. Enough of my nonsense. Let's hear what Brody has to say about this.
Oh,
so Brody,
my super conventional number one.
Are you here to save us? Are you here to save us all?
We are. I'm here to save you all with my very predictable and safe number one. It's Empire Strikes Back. I mean, there's a reason that this is the movie everyone says is the best Star Wars movie. I'm not here to be a contrarian about that. It is the best Star Wars movie. It's everything. It's got it introduces like the mysticism, the philosophy, all that, like that extra stuff that I think is lacking when you go back to A New Hope. It enriches that world, what the Force is, what this battle of good and evil, what it means, rather than just being like, well, they wear black and we wear this, and we're the good guys, they're the bad guys. In Empire, it's a little more unclear. I mean, especially with like the reveal of who Luke's father is and him seeing himself in him in that, in the cave and all that, and just it's everything that I love about, like, I mean, all the stuff we're talking about in Clone Wars, all the stuff we're talking about in, Rogue One, Last Jedi, all these, whatever film you like, it's not there unless Empire Strikes Back happens. Like, it is really the invention of Star Wars, at least in a more spiritual way. And you add on top of that great action, the Battle of Hoth, like the asteroid chase, the final duel.
Hoth is yeah, I mean, and the asteroid.
And then you add the romance. I think romance is something that's so important to Star Wars, and it's there and it doesn't feel awful. It's not. I'm not fast forwarding it like I do with the prequels. It's genuinely charming, and their chemistry. You want them to fall in love. I mean, it's perfect. And then all the Luke stuff. You want Luke to succeed, but you also sort of see that, like when Luke goes to save him, I'm kind of all over the place here. It's a bit scattershot, but I just love this.
No, but that's totally cool. But, yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah,
like when Luke goes to save his friends, and Luke and Yoda and Obi-Wan are saying like, "Oh no, don't go." You sort of see like a little bit of that hint of failure in the Jedi, where it's like Luke's right. Like Luke caring this much about his friends is what makes him a good Jedi. And Obi-Wan and Yoda's failure to see that kind of illustrates why Darth Vader became Darth Vader in the first place. And it's one of those things that you don't even realize until you look back after the trilogy is over and you go, oh, okay, yeah, that it doesn't hit you in the moment. It's more sort of like as you think about it, it just makes everything so much richer, so much more entertaining. And the fact that it could do that and also just be a crowd-pleasing popcorn flick is everything. It's perfect. It's perfect.
No, I mean, I literally agree with everything you just said. I have no quarrel with this movie. It's best for a reason on many people's lists. It's even funny, like even as a kid, this was always the one I gravitated towards when I would watch the trilogy, and I didn't really know why at the time, but it was just like there was something magical about this. Maybe it was the Battle of Hoth, maybe it was Yoda, maybe it was like a myriad of other reasons. But
it's like it's dark too. It's like not. It's not dark in like a noticeable way. It's not like they go to like Temple of Doom or anything like that. But it is. Like there's just a sinisterness to it. Like there's more shadows. Everything just seems murkier and more hard to grasp.
Even the cave, man. Even the cave. The stuff at the cave is pretty intense.
Yeah,
it's dark. Like, it goes there,
And just like the fact that like, I mean, like this has all been said a million times, but I just feel like it would be wrong to not mention it. But like Yoda.
It's wrong to not talk about it.
Yoda being the little guy that like the looks being deceiving, which is a huge part of Star Wars, and like it just introduces everything that I like about Star Wars, and that alone isn't a reason to put it at the top. But I just think it has never been matched in how it addresses those ideas. There have been films that get really close, but it is still just a cut above the rest in terms of, and it's beautiful looking. It's just a beautiful looking film.
It is. It's gorgeously shot. Yeah.
And I mean, like, you can really like watching it and Star Wars back to back. You look at A New Hope, and it's like obviously a beautifully written. It's a really well paced, really well edited movie with great like casting. But Empire is just, it's a well written movie. It's
got everything,
and like you can tell that like there's like a filmmaker who cares about characters who's directing it, whereas I think George Lucas is a director. He cares about the spectacle. He cares about the technical aspects of filmmaking, and he doesn't really care about the characters are just props for him to shoot. And Empire, Irvin Kershner got that Star Wars was not going to work as a series unless you really built the characters, and he did it. He madman did it. Him, and I should give credit to Lawrence Kasdan as well, who
Lawrence Kasdan, and I know it's kind of
second billing as the creator of Star Wars. I think
he really. I mean, there's a reason why his involvement in Solo got people excited. Unfortunately, I didn't see Empire Strikes Back level of Kasdan. I saw.
I mean, he didn't write the whole thing, but I think his son did. But which may be a little nepotism, but I do think you can still see that little spark, like that love of adventure and romance, and that's Kasdan. So he wrote Raiders too. So
and he wrote Raiders, and I think that's all you got to say about that.
Honestly,
Raiders, Empire. I mean, do you have to write anything else?
Honestly, yeah. No, I mean, he really pretty much didn't. He wrote and directed a couple of things that are not as good, but
the other thing, I mean, you didn't really touch on though that I love is Cloud City. Just amazing location. I love Lando, an incredible introduction. I mean, Billy D. Williams is just the coolest cat on the planet. And really...
Cloud City is what's crazy about this whole movie, not just Cloud City, but Cloud City is a good example of it. In the first Star Wars movie, you have like a desert and like a coolly designed set, but it's basically just an interior. And then you have like a jungle that's just an existing jungle. And I think you get to Empire and it's like, we're going to go nuts. This is going to be like truly alien in terms of like just the locations. Like you've got it's just ice, but you've got like abominable snowmen roaming around and like these weird creatures that they ride, and the Tauntaun. And just so people know that I know that. And then you got Dagobah, and you got Dagobah, and it's like it's a swamp, but it's almost more moody than any swamp on Earth could ever be. And Cloud City, which is this floating city in the sky, everything is truly alien, and the production design is taken to the next level. And again, I mean, like, just going off of Star Wars, you wouldn't really assume that's the direction the series is going in, but it goes from purely space junk, like you said, into being more like high fantasy space junk.
And that's it definitely is like the template for, like, you know, where Lucas would take the prequels, and I love that. I love the like high fantasy space junk sort of thing. But guys, we've made it.
It's a marathon.
2 hours, 2 hours, 40 minutes, the length of one Star Wars movie. Actually, probably longer than the length of one Star Wars. Well, depends on which one you're watching.
Skywalker.
Yeah, right. The length of, like, you know, a season of Clone Wars. I don't even know. But we're here. There you have it. Those are our respective top, or just rankings of all the Star Wars movies, including some of the more important shows. Thank you all for tuning in and joining this. It's been a lot of fun. You guys were great in the chat. Really enjoyed interacting with you. Listen, if you are watching this on the replay, if you are watching this on the replay, definitely let us know your ranking of the Star Wars films, including the Clone Wars series, Rebels, and The Mandalorian, down in the comments section below. And if you're in the stream, give this video a like right now, share with your friends, anyone who's got like 2 hours and 40 minutes to kill to make for a great podcast, who knows. Share with them, and let them enjoy our controversial opinions. Hopefully we explain them well. That's the key there. But I want to give a big thank you to my friend Brody Cervelli here. Brody, where can everyone find you online?
Well, you can find, if you want to hear more hot takes, you can find me at Brody Cervelli. I'm sure that'll be in the description, so you can don't have to worry about the spelling of that. And then also, we do a James Bond podcast. We haven't done one in a while, but we do it, and it does still exist. Words are not enough. And you can follow that account. You can give us a follow on iTunes as well if you want. But you can follow the @TwainPod, because I occasionally tweet James Bond stuff there if you like James Bond. I don't know if you can see it, but I have my Living Daylights poster on the wall there, so I'm a big James Bond fan too.
Poster right there.
Yeah, I know. I was gonna say I got spotted in the chat, so you. So I mean, follow me at either one of those. Or don't. Or
don't. You know, and we're actually, give you guys who are watching this live a little bit of a tease. We're probably gonna do a like a weekly live Bond chat, not structured like the podcast, but it's going to be a live video chat similar to like this. We'll talk Bond, we'll take your questions, we'll just like pick a topic, and it'll be really, really casual. So if you're a James Bond fan and you're interested in that, you have that to look forward to as well. But thank you, Brody, definitely for joining me. I know this was like a 2 hour, 40-minute thing, but I always just like doing these because it's great to get get your opinions out there, talk about it, and then
this is good.
Yeah, good stuff for sure. But guys, listen, thank you all for watching this. Be sure to subscribe to the FilmSpeak channel for more content like this, movie reviews, podcast style stuff, some live stream, all that good stuff. You can like FilmSpeak on Facebook, follow us on Twitter simply by searching FilmSpeak. And lastly, if you like me specifically and you like what I have to say, you can give me a follow on Twitter at Griff Schiller. All right, it's been a real pleasure ranking the Star Wars films with you guys. And until next time, take care.
Did you rub my lamp?
Thousands of generations to the Una.
Here we go.